Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Evelyn Montgomery. I used to be respected in my field, marine biology, with a focus on how creatures change to survive in harsh environments. But that was before my paper on rapid human evolution got me laughed out of academia. My colleagues called my ideas crazy. Maybe they were right. When the offer came to study water quality at a research station deep in the Florida Everglades, I jumped at it. Nobody asks questions in the swamp. Nobody cares about your past mistakes. It was my chance to start over. The Daciashi boat ride to the station took nearly 2 hours, winding through narrow channels between towering cypress trees draped with Spanish moss. The air felt heavy, like breathing through a wet blanket. Something about those ancient trees watching us pass made me feel small, like we didn't belong. "That's it up ahead," the boat driver said, pointing to a large white building rising out of the swamp. It was an old plantation house, standing on stilts above the dark water, surrounded by a wooden dock that wrapped around the entire structure. Raymond Duval, the station manager, waited for me on the dock. He was a tall, skinny man with a permanent, worried look on his face. He helped me with my bags, but kept glancing nervously at the water as the sun began to set. "We need to get inside," he said, checking his watch. "Rule number 1 at the station, nobody goes outside after dark, no exceptions." "Why?" I asked, but he just shook his head and hurried me inside. The station was nicer than I expected. Modern lab equipment, comfortable living quarters, even a decent kitchen. I met my fellow researcher, Owen Parker, a bearded ecologist who studied local plant life. He seemed friendly enough, offering to help me set up my equipment. "Heard anything strange since you've been here?" I asked him as we unpacked my microscopes. Owen hesitated. "Local fishermen going missing, wildlife showing up with unusual features. Just swamp rumors, probably." "Probably," I agreed, but something in his voice made me doubt it. That night, I found a box of notes left by Dr. Carmichael, the researcher I was replacing. Most of it was standard water quality reports, but tucked in the back was a separate notebook filled with observations about strange parasitic organisms he'd discovered in the deeper regions of the swamp. The handwriting grew increasingly messy toward the end, with the final entry simply saying, "They're not parasites, they're messengers." The next morning I met Travis Hammond, our local guide. He was a weathered man who clearly knew the swamp better than he knew the comfort of walls and roofs. I showed him the map areas I wanted to collect samples from. "Not going there," he said immediately, pointing to the deepest part of the swamp I had marked. "Bad water." "Bad how?" I asked. "Just bad," he replied, refusing to elaborate. We compromised. On several other locations, over the next few days, I established my laboratory routine. The water samples I collected contained microorganisms unlike any I'd seen before. When exposed to different environments, heat, cold, salt, fresh water, they adapted at rates that should have been impossible, changing their structure within hours instead of generations. One night during a storm, I went to the kitchen for coffee and noticed a door I hadn't seen before, partially hidden behind a storage shelf. It was unlocked. Inside was a small room lined with glass jars containing preserved specimens, fish with mammalian features, amphibians with extra limbs, and things I couldn't even identify. The specimens were labeled with dates going back decades. That same night, unable to sleep with the storm raging outside, I saw movement in the water surrounding the station. Not the splashing of rain, but deliberate shapes moving beneath the surface, human-sized shadows gliding just below the water. The next day, I cornered Travis as he prepared the boat. "What aren't you telling me about this place?" I demanded. He looked around nervously before answering. "There are stories, old stories about the water people. Each generation, they take someone. Been that way since before my grandfather's time." "Water people?" I repeated. "People who went into the deep parts of the swamp and changed," he said quietly. "They say once the swamp gets in your blood, it calls you back." I laughed, but Travis didn't join me. He just stared at the dark water lapping against our boat, his eyes filled with a fear I would soon come to understand all too well. A week into my stay at the station, Owen knocked on my lab door. His face was pale, and he kept scratching at his neck. "Can I show you something?" he asked, his voice shaky. I don't know who else to ask. He pulled down the collar of his shirt. Red sores ran along both sides of his neck. They weren't normal cuts or bug bites. The skin had split into 3 parallel lines on each side, and the edges looked different, almost like they were opening up. "They started as itchy spots 2 days ago," he whispered. "Now they burn and feel wet all the time." I took a skin sample and put it under my microscope. What I saw made my stomach drop. The cells were changing, reorganizing themselves into something that looked frighteningly like gill tissue. "Have you been swimming in the swamp?" I asked. "No," he said. "I haven't even been in the water. Just collected plant samples from the shore. That evening I ran tests on all my water samples. The organisms I'd found weren't just adapting to their environment, they were actively changing it. They could survive in both water and air by somehow altering their cell structure in minutes. Nothing in nature works that fast. The next day, I found an old storage room filled with dusty boxes. Inside were yellowed papers and photos from when the building was still a plantation. One journal described water experiments performed on the slaves. The writer talked about mixing swamp water with blood and watching for the change. Several entries mentioned subjects who escaped into the swamp, only to be seen later, no longer fully human. I was reading these when I felt someone behind me. "Finding anything interesting?" Raymond asked. His sudden appearance made me jump. "Just some old history," I said, closing the journal quickly. That afternoon, I took the boat out alone to collect more samples. I reached into the murky water to fill a container when something grabbed my wrist. It felt like a hand, cold, strong, and slippery. I yanked my arm back, scraping it on the side of the boat, and whatever had hold of me let go. My arm had 4 long cuts that burned like fire. I cleaned and bandaged them back at the station, but by morning they'd already started healing, much faster than they should have. The skin around the cuts had a strange blue-green tint. When I confronted Raymond with what I'd found, he finally broke down. "We're not just studying water quality," he admitted. "We're monitoring something living in the deeper parts of the swamp, something the government has known about for decades." "What kind of something?" I demanded. Before he could answer, we heard shouting from the dock. Travis's empty boat had drifted up against our pier. His gear was still on board, and strange slime covered the seats. No sign of Travis himself. That night I dreamed I was swimming through dark water, but I wasn't afraid of drowning. I could breathe just fine. I swam past underwater ruins that looked ancient, with carvings of half-human, half-fish creatures on crumbling walls. I woke up gasping, my bedsheets soaked with sweat. In the bathroom mirror, I noticed the blue-green color from my cuts had spread into tiny lines under my skin, like a web of colored veins stretching up my arm. I heard a splash outside and went to my window. Something was moving in the water below, something big. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it down, catching a glimpse of a pale, elongated body slipping beneath the surface. By morning, Owen was gone. I rushed to his room and found the door unlocked. The bathroom floor was wet, and in the tub was something that turned my blood cold. A large piece of skin, like someone had shed it. It was definitely human skin, but changed somehow. Thinner, and almost translucent. The radio stopped working that same day. Raymond said it was because of the storm coming, but I didn't believe him anymore. The water level around the station was rising too. Even though there hadn't been much rain, I went back to the storage room and dug deeper into the old records. I found a handwritten account from 1872 describing a water sickness that affected escaped slaves who hid in the deepest parts of the swamp. They would return changed, able to stay underwater for impossible lengths of time, their skin developing strange colors. When I showed this to Raymond, he finally told me the truth. The government knows there's some kind of amphibious humanoid species living in these waters. They've been here for centuries, maybe longer. That's why we're really here, to study them from a safe distance. Safe distance, I repeated. Owen is gone. Travis is gone. And look at this. I showed him the blue-green web spreading under my skin. That night, we took the boat out to search for Owen. The storm was getting closer, lightning flashing over the swamp. Our spotlight caught movement in the water. Human-shaped figures swimming alongside us, then vanishing with barely a ripple. They moved impossibly fast. They led us to a partially submerged structure, concrete and metal mixed with ancient stone. It looked like someone had built modern equipment into ruins that were thousands of years old. "What is this place?" I whispered. "Where they take them," Raymond said, his voice hollow. "Where they change them." Then he confessed the worst part. He'd been working with them, feeding them information about researchers like me, sending people like my predecessor out to be recruited when they showed signs of being compatible with the transformation. And a exchange. The entities provided biological samples that the government desperately wanted. As we argued, I noticed something strange about the water lapping against our boat. It moved against the wind, as if responding to our voices. I dragged my fingers through it, and it seemed to curl around them, almost affectionately. "The water itself is alive," I whispered. "Or at least conscious in some way." Raymond nodded, grimly. "Now you're starting to understand." Thunder boomed overhead as we headed back to the station. In the flash of lightning, I saw them, dozens of figures in the water surrounding us. Some looked almost human, while others were clearly something else, with elongated limbs and features that shifted between human and fish. Among them, I recognized faces from missing person photos I'd seen in town. The storm broke just as we reached the station. Through the driving rain, I saw them crawling onto the dock, their skin glistening in the lightning flashes. Too many to count, too many to escape. I ran inside the station and locked the doors, but I knew it wouldn't keep them out. For long, Raymond stayed on the dock, talking to them like they were old friends. Through the window, I watched as two of the creatures pulled him into the water. He didn't fight back. I grabbed my research, a flashlight, and a knife from the kitchen. As I rushed to find a way out, the station's power went out, leaving me in darkness. Water began seeping in under the doors. Something broke through a window in the back room. I heard wet, slapping footsteps coming my way. I hid in a closet, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. The footsteps stopped right outside my hiding place. Then a voice, barely human but somehow familiar, whispered my name. "Evelyn, come out! You're already changing, can't you feel it?" It was Owen's voice, but wrong, like he was talking with a mouth full of water. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stay quiet. The cuts on my arm burned, and the blue-green lines had spread across my chest overnight. My skin felt tight, wrong. Suddenly the closet door was ripped open. Before I could scream, wet hands grabbed me and dragged me out. The last thing I remember was being pulled into dark water, certain I was going to drown. But I didn't drown. When I opened my eyes, I was underwater, deep underwater, but I was breathing. I touched my neck and felt what Owen had shown me days before. 3 slits on each side, opening and closing as water passed through them. Gills. I had gills. 2 figures swam toward me. One I recognized as Owen, but he was different now. His body was longer, his fingers and toes webbed, his eyes large and dark. Swimming beside him was another creature who I somehow knew was Travis, though he looked even less human than Owen. "Don't be afraid," Owen said, but not with his mouth. The words just appeared in my head. "You're safe here." They led me deeper, to a place that took my breath away, what was left of it. An underwater complex spread out before me, part ancient ruins, part modern facility. Tunnels and chambers carved from stone, mixed with concrete structures and glass observation rooms. Lights powered from some unknown source illuminated everything in a blue-green glow. Inside these chambers were people, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, in various stages of change. Some looked mostly human, newly taken like me. Others were somewhere, in the middle, their bodies transforming. And some were completely changed, like my guides. Owen led me to a large central chamber where a group of the fully transformed waited. They looked at me with large, unblinking eyes. "We've been watching you for a long time, Dr. Montgomery," one of them said in my mind. "Your theories about rapid human evolution were correct, more correct than you knew." They explained that they weren't monsters or a separate species, but humans who had embraced an ancient form of transformation. Their civilization had existed beneath the waters for thousands of years, discovering the secret to biological immortality through controlled evolution. "The parasites in your blood aren't hurting you," Owen explained. "They're connecting you to us, to our shared consciousness. They're changing your body to survive in our world." I looked around at the chambers filled with changing humans. All these people, did they choose this? Owen looked away. Some did. Some will come to accept it like I have. I learned that they specifically recruited scientists like me who showed genetic compatibility with the transformation. They needed our knowledge to perfect their evolution process, to make it faster and more complete. The next day, or what felt like a day, time was hard to track underwater. I was shown more of their world. The blue-green parasites in my blood were changing how I thought, making everything seem more reasonable, more natural. Part of me knew this was wrong, but that part was getting smaller. The creatures could control water itself, moving it, shaping it, even using it to travel quickly from one place to another. They explained that water wasn't just what they lived in, it was part of them, an extension of their consciousness. That's when Raymond arrived with a team of people in diving gear. Government, agents. He didn't seem surprised to see me alive. "We've had an arrangement for decades," one of the transformed beings told me. "They provide us with compatible subjects. We provide them with biological samples they can study. They think they're in control." I watched as the agents set up equipment, taking samples and photographs. They had weapons, but seemed to have no idea of the danger they were in. When one agent tried to take a sample from a chamber containing newly transformed humans, everything changed. The water around him suddenly hardened, then contracted, crushing his diving gear and pulling him deeper. Others tried to help, but found themselves trapped as the water itself became a weapon. In the chaos, I saw my chance. I swam for the surface, fighting the strange impulse in my mind telling me to stay, to embrace the change. Every stroke away from the complex felt like swimming through mud as the parasites in my blood fought against my escape. I broke the surface near the research station, now partially flooded. Rain still poured from the sky as I dragged myself inside, fighting to stay conscious. The gills on my neck burned in the open air, but I could still breathe through my lungs. In my lab, I realized something horrible. My research had been guided all along. The controversial theories that had ruined my career weren't just random ideas. The parasites had already been influencing me, preparing me, making me the perfect candidate for transformation. I gathered all my research and was about to destroy it when a sound made me turn around. Travis stood in the doorway, water pooling at his feet. His transformation was nearly complete, his body now scaled and elongated, his face barely recognizable. Yet something human remained in his eyes. "It only hurts if you fight it," he said, his voice a gurgling whisper. "The change isn't something they do to you. It's something you have to accept." "I don't want it," I said, backing away. "Your body already does," he replied, pointing to my neck where the gills fluttered painfully. "Once the water gets in your blood, it calls you back. Always." The floor beneath us cracked as water began gushing in from below. The whole station was sinking, being pulled down by forces I couldn't see. Travis reached for me, but I pushed past him and ran for the dock. The government boat was still there. I jumped in, started the engine, and sped away as the research station collapsed behind me, water swallowing it whole. 6 months later, I was working at a coastal research facility in Oregon, about as far from the Florida Everglades as I could get. I'd managed to hide my gills, which had stopped developing but never fully disappeared. The blue-green lines under my skin had faded to almost nothing. I told no one what happened. Who would believe? Me? Then one evening, checking water samples from the Pacific, I saw them. The same parasitic organisms I'd found in the Everglades, thousands of miles away. They shouldn't have been there. Couldn't have been there, unless they were spreading. In my hotel bathroom that night, I peeled off the bandages I kept over my neck. The gills looked fresher, healthier than they had in months. As I touched them, images flooded my mind, rising oceans, coastal cities slowly drowning, and beneath the waves, new life evolving, waiting. I don't know how much time I have before the change completes itself. The water is patient, but it never stops calling. Some nights I find myself walking toward the ocean without meaning to. Other nights I dream of the ruins beneath the Everglades and wake up with my sheets soaked, as if I'd been swimming in my sleep. The truth I discovered too late is that the water doesn't just want me, it wants all of us. And as the seas rise year by year, it's only a matter of time before the world becomes theirs again. The funny thing is, I'm not even scared anymore. Part of me is actually looking forward to it, and that's the most terrifying thing of all. My name is Rebecca Gordon. I never thought I'd be telling this story to anyone, but maybe putting these words down will help me make sense of what happened to us in those mountains. Maybe someone will find this and know to stay away. It all started 3 months ago when my brother Michael and I got the news about Grandpa Joe's death. We hadn't seen him in years, not since we were kids. Mom always said he was odd and kept us away from him. The lawyer's letter surprised us both. Grandpa had left us his property in West Virginia, deep in the Appalachian Mountains. "What do you think, Becca?" Michael asked as we drove down the winding mountain road. "Fresh start for both of us?" I nodded, watching the thick forest pass by through the car window. We both needed this. Michael was 6 months clean after getting hooked on pain pills from his construction accident. The scars on his back were nothing compared to the ones inside. And me? I was running from Jake and the bruises that were finally fading. Two broken people looking for a place to heal. "How far out is this place anyway?" I asked, checking the map again. "Should be just ahead." The lawyer said it's about 5 miles from the nearest town. The road narrowed and gravel crunched under our tires. When we finally pulled up to the property, my heart sank a little. The house was old and worn, with peeling paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. Behind it, I could see the entrance to what looked like an old mining operation. Rusty equipment and boarded-up tunnel openings. "Home, sweet home," Michael tried to joke, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We spent that first day just trying to make one room livable. The inside of the house was cluttered with Grandpa's belongings. Books, papers, strange collections of rocks and bones. There were crosses over every doorway and odd symbols carved into the wooden frames. Grandpa got religious in his old age, Michael asked, pointing to one of the symbols. I shook my head. That's not any religious symbol I've ever seen. The next morning, we drove into town for supplies. The small main street had just one grocery store, a hardware store, and a diner. As we loaded bags into our car, I noticed how people stared at us. You must be the Gordon kids, a man said, approaching us outside the store. He was tall with deep wrinkles carved into his weathered face. Taking over the old place? That's right, Michael said, extending his hand. The man didn't take it. That land has bad earth, he said, his voice low. Your grandfather knew that. Some places ain't meant for living. Before we could ask what he meant, he walked away. Friendly locals, I muttered. They're just not used to outsiders, Michael said. But I could tell he was unsettled too. Back at the house, we continued cleaning. In the hallway closet, I found a heavy iron horseshoe hanging from a red string. Michael, come look at this, I called. There's iron stuff like this all over the house. We started noticing them everywhere. Iron nails above windows, iron figurines, on shelves, even iron dust mixed into the paint around door frames. Maybe Grandpa was superstitious, Michael suggested. That afternoon, an old woman came walking up our driveway carrying a covered dish. She introduced herself as Eliza Thompson, our nearest neighbor, though nearest still meant over a mile away. Brought you some cornbread, she said, handing me the dish. Her eyes darted around nervously. Your grandfather and I were friends. Of sorts. We invited her in for coffee, hoping to learn more about Grandpa. Joseph was a good man, she said, her hands trembling slightly as she held her mug. But he understood what needed doing, what needs to keep being done. What do you mean? I asked. She looked at me with sad eyes. Always keep something iron above every door and window. Promise me that. Before leaving, she glanced at the basement door, which had several heavy locks on it, all designed to keep something in, not out. Don't go disturbing what's down there, she warned. Some things are best left sleeping. That night I found a box of Grandpa's journals in the attic. I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor and opened the oldest one, dated 1954. Found more tracks. Today, the thin people are getting bolder. Left the offering at the mouth of the North Tunnel. By morning it was gone. They prefer the marrow, always have. I felt a chill run down my spine. Thin people? Offerings? In another journal from the 1960s, he'd drawn maps of tunnel systems with notes about nesting areas and feeding grounds. The maps showed the mining tunnels connecting to natural cave systems that ran deep under the mountain. As I was reading, Michael called from downstairs. Becca, come listen to this. He was standing in the living room, completely still. What am I listening for? I whispered. Just wait. Then I heard it, a faint tapping sound like tiny hammers working far below us. When I stepped to the right, the sound disappeared. When I moved back, it was clear again. This spot amplifies sounds from underneath, Michael said. There must be some kind of acoustic channel. From the mines? He shook his head. The mines don't extend under the house. At least they're not supposed to. We spent the next few days renovating, trying to make the place feel less like Grandpa's and more like ours. We took down some of the iron fixtures that were in the way of our painting. That night I dreamed of crawling through tight, winding tunnels, my shoulders scraping against rough stone. Ahead of me, something moved in the darkness, thin, pale limbs reaching back toward me. I woke with a start to the sound of Michael shouting. I ran to his room to find him standing on his bed, staring at the wall. Something's in there, he whispered. I heard scratching, like fingernails on the inside of the wall. We pressed our ears against the plaster, but heard nothing. Eventually, Michael calmed down. Sorry, he said, rubbing his eyes. Maybe I'm just on edge. This house makes weird noises. It's just settling, I assured him, but as I went back to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me through the cracks in the walls. The next morning, Michael seemed embarrassed about his late-night panic. He threw himself into work, focusing on the basement door. "I want to see what's down there," he said. "Grandpa had all these locks for a reason. Maybe we should respect his wishes," I suggested, remembering Eliza's warning. Michael just grinned. "Come on, sis. Aren't you curious? Probably just old mining equipment or moonshine stills." He worked on the locks all day, finally getting them open by sunset. The heavy door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. The beam of our flashlight showed a large room with dirt floors and stone walls, old shelves lined with jars of unidentifiable contents, a table with leather straps, tools I didn't recognize, and in the dust covering the floor, small humanoid footprints. Too small for a child, with elongated toes that looked almost like fingers. "Michael," I whispered, pointing. He knelt down, examining them. "Could be raccoons or something," he said, but his voice shook. As we turned to leave, I noticed something scratched into the wall beside the stairs, a crude drawing of stick figures standing over what looked like a hole or pit, with long, thin arms reaching up from below. That night, lying in bed, I heard it for the first time, the soft, barely audible sound of something scratching inside the walls, moving through spaces too small for anything human. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, sure I'd heard something moving. By morning, I was tired and jumpy. Michael seemed different too. He was quiet at breakfast, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I keep thinking about those footprints in the basement," I said, pushing my eggs around my plate. "Maybe we have mice," he replied, but he wouldn't look at me. Later that morning, I noticed something odd. The coffee mug I'd left on the kitchen counter was gone. I found it an hour later in the bathtub upstairs. When I asked Michael if he'd moved it, he just shook his head. "Things keep disappearing," I told him a few days later. My hairbrush had vanished, only to show up inside a sealed box in the attic. Michael's watch went missing from his nightstand and turned up in the garden, half buried. "Old houses are like that," he said with a shrug. "Things get misplaced." But I could tell he didn't believe that any more than I did. One afternoon, I was cleaning the living room when I noticed something in the wall. A crack, barely wider than my pinky finger. As I leaned in to look closer, I could swear I saw movement. Deep inside, when I shone a flashlight into it, the beam didn't hit a back wall. The space went deeper than it should have. I found more cracks and tiny holes throughout the house, all easy to miss, unless you were looking for them. Some were behind furniture, others hidden in the patterns of the wallpaper. Most were too small for even a mouse to fit through. But when I put my ear against them, I sometimes heard faint sounds, like breathing or the soft click of teeth. Michael was spending more and more time studying Grandpa's maps and journals. He'd spread them out across the dining room table, making notes and drawing his own versions. "The mining tunnels connect to natural caves," he told me, eyes bright with excitement. "And those caves go deep, Becca, deeper than anyone's mapped." "Why? Do you care so much?" I asked. "Don't you feel it?" he whispered. "There's something down there, something important." His hands shook slightly as he spoke, and I noticed he kept scratching at his arms. The same restless movements from when he was using pills. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked. "You seem off." "Never better," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just not sleeping great. Keep having these dreams." "About what?" He hesitated. "Crawling, tight spaces, and voices calling from deep down." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I'd been having similar dreams. The next day, my friend, Lily, came to visit from the city. She'd been worried about me since I'd moved out here, away from everything. "This place is really remote," she said, as we sat on the porch drinking iced tea. Are you sure you're okay out here? It's peaceful, I said, though even to my own ears. The words sounded hollow. That night, we stayed up late talking in the living room. Michael had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache. Around midnight, Lily went to the guest room, and I fell asleep on the couch. I woke to screaming. Grabbing the fireplace poker, I ran to the guest room. The door was open, the bed empty. Lily was gone. "Lily!" I shouted, checking the bathroom. The kitchen outside. I found Michael standing in the hallway looking dazed. "What's happening?" "It's Lily. She's missing." We searched the whole house. In the kitchen, we found drops of blood leading to a small hole in the wall near the floor, a hole that I swear hadn't been there the day before. The blood trail ended right at the opening, which wasn't much bigger than my fist. "That's impossible," Michael whispered. "She couldn't fit through there." We called the police, but they didn't take us seriously. They suggested Lily had probably just left in the night, without telling us. When we showed them the blood drops, the officer said it was probably from a cut she'd gotten before leaving. "This happen often around here?" I asked angrily. "People just disappearing?" The sheriff gave me a long look. "More often than you'd think, miss." After they left, I sat on the porch steps, trying not to cry. Michael sat beside me, putting his arm around my shoulders. "We'll find her," he said. But his voice was flat, empty. Over the next few days, Michael changed. He'd stand for long periods, staring at small cracks or crevices in the walls. Sometimes I'd catch him whispering to them. When I asked what he was doing, he'd look confused, as if waking from a trance. "Just thinking out loud," he'd say. One night, a thunderstorm hit. As lightning flashed and thunder boomed, I heard something responding from deep below the house. Movement, rhythmic and synchronized with each thunderclap. Like something was using the noise as cover to move around. The power went out, leaving us with just candles and flashlights. In the dim light, Michael's face looked gaunt, his movements strangely fluid as he paced the living room. "We should leave," I said. "Something's wrong with this place, with us." "We can't leave," he said, his voice oddly calm. "They won't let us. Not now that they know we're here." "Who won't let us?" He just smiled and went back to staring at the wall. The next day, I decided to learn more about the property. In Grandpa's study, behind a loose panel, I found a hidden compartment containing a metal box. Inside were newspaper clippings, dozens of them, dating back decades, all about missing persons in the area. I spread them out on the floor, hands shaking. So many people vanished without a trace, and notes in my grandfather's handwriting in the margins. Offering accepted. Balance maintained. Agreement upheld. Beneath the clippings was a leather-bound book filled with drawings. Cave, art copied from somewhere deep underground. They showed elongated human figures worshipping something that lived beneath the mountain, something with too many limbs and no eyes. A knock at the door made me jump. It was Eliza Thompson, her face pale and frightened. "You've broken the agreement," she said without preamble, pushing past me into the house. "What agreement?" I asked, following her to the kitchen. "What's happening here?" She looked around nervously. "Where's your brother?" "Out walking. He does that a lot now." "It's starting then," she muttered. I feared as much. Eliza sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as I made her tea. "Your grandfather understood what had to be done," she said. "What all the families who've lived here have always done." "Which is what?" She took a deep breath. "The cave crawlers were here before us. The first settlers tried to hunt them, drive them out, but they just went deeper, learned to survive in spaces we can't reach. They're smart, miss. Smart and patient." I felt cold despite the summer heat. "What are they?" "They used to be like us a long time ago. But living down there changed them. They can move differently, get their bodies through spaces that should be too small. And they can get in your head, make you think things, do things." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They need bone marrow to survive. Your grandfather and others, they made a deal. Regular offerings to keep them from coming up and taking what they wanted?" "Offerings?" I felt sick. "You mean people, like these?" I showed her the newspaper clippings. She nodded sadly. Mostly drifters, people no one would miss. One every few months. But you two came and changed things, stopped the offerings. Now they're hungry and angry. This is insane, I said, standing up. These are just stories to scare newcomers. Then where's your friend? Eliza asked quietly. The one who visited? Where did she go? Before I could answer, we heard the front door open. Michael walked in, his movements jerky, unnatural. He looked at Eliza with cold eyes. You shouldn't have come here, old woman, he said. His voice wrong somehow, like two voices speaking at once. Eliza stood up so fast her chair fell over. God help us, she whispered. They're already inside him. She backed away toward the door, but Michael moved with impossible speed, blocking her path. You know too much, he said, head tilting at an angle that should have broken his neck. But they've waited a long time for fresh blood. The Gordon blood. I screamed as Michael's arm shot out, grabbing Eliza by the throat. His elbow bent backward, his fingers elongating as they wrapped around her neck. There was a loud crack from the floor beneath us. A split appeared in the wooden boards, widening rapidly. Before I could move, Eliza was pulled down, not by Michael, but by pale, thin hands reaching up through the crack. Hands attached to arms that stretched and bent in impossible ways. The crack wasn't wide enough for a person. Not nearly. But somehow, Eliza's body was pulled through it anyway, her bones making horrible cracking sounds as she disappeared into the darkness below. Michael turned to me, smiling with too many teeth. They're coming up now, Becca. Coming to meet you. They've been waiting for so long. And from somewhere deep beneath the house, I heard the sound of many things moving quickly through narrow spaces, heading upward. Heading toward me, I ran. There was nothing else to do. I ran up the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Behind me, I heard Michael laughing, that horrible, wrong laugh that wasn't just his voice anymore. Made it to my bedroom and slammed the door shut, dragging my dresser in front of it. My hands shook as I searched the room for anything iron. Grandpa's warning suddenly made terrible sense. I found an old fire poker under my bed and clutched it like a weapon. Outside my door, I heard footsteps, slow, dragging. Not just Michael's. Becca. My brother called, his voice sing-song and childish. Don't be scared. They just want to meet you. Something scratched at my door, not from the height of the doorknob, but from near the floor. Then from the middle of the door, then from near the ceiling, like multiple hands were feeling their way around the edges. Go away, I screamed, backing, up until I hit the wall. We can't do that, Michael said. We've been waiting for you, for someone from your bloodline. Grandpa promised us another Gordon, you see, after he became too old. What did you do to my brother? I cried. There was a pause, then a horrible chuckle. I'm still Michael, just improved. They showed me how to free myself from this tight, restrictive body, how to move as they move, and they can show you too. The scratching at my door grew louder. The dresser began to slide across the floor, as something pushed against the door with impossible strength. I looked around desperately for an escape. The window was too high up to jump, and there was nothing I could use to climb down. I was trapped. Then I saw it, a crack in the wall behind. My bed, had it always been there? It was widening as I watched, plaster falling away to reveal a dark space behind. I had a terrible choice. Stay and face whatever was about to come through my door, or take my chances with the darkness in the wall. The dresser slid another inch. The door began to splinter. I made my decision. Clutching the iron poker, I pushed my bed aside and faced the crack in the wall. It was wider now, maybe just big enough for me to squeeze through if I turned sideways. I had no idea where it led, but I had no choice. I took a deep breath and pushed myself into the opening, feeling the rough edges scrape against my clothes. The space was tight, so tight I could barely breathe, but I forced myself forward, away from the sounds of my bedroom door finally giving way. The passage twisted downward at a steep angle. I lost my grip and slid, scraping my arms and face on the rough stone. I bit my lip to keep from screaming as I fell deeper and deeper into the mountain. After what felt like forever, I landed hard on a dirt floor in near total darkness. The only light came from the passage I'd fallen through, now just a small opening far above me. I still had the poker gripped tightly in my hand. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam revealed a large cave, with multiple tunnels leading off in different directions. The walls were covered in claw marks and strange symbols like the ones I'd seen in Grandpa's book. A sound echoed from one of the tunnels, a wet, sliding noise that made my skin crawl. I backed away, looking for somewhere to hide. Instead, I bumped into something soft, something that shouldn't have been there. I turned slowly, raising my light. Michael stood there, smiling at me, but it wasn't really Michael anymore. His skin was stretched too tight across his face. His arms hung at impossible angles, joints bending the wrong way. And his eyes were huge and black in the flashlight beam, with no whites showing at all. "How did you get down here?" I whispered. He tilted his head, the movement fluid like his neck had extra joints. "There are so many ways down, Becca. So many paths between the walls, through the earth. I know them all now." He took a step toward me, his leg bending like it had an extra knee. I raised the iron poker and he hissed, drawing back. "That won't help you for long," he said. "They've been building immunity, breeding with humans for generations. Iron burns less with each new blending." "What are you talking about?" I asked, keeping the poker between us. "The colony needs fresh blood," he explained patiently, like I was a child. "Your blood. Gordon blood is special, more compatible. That's why they let Grandpa live so long, why they kept him." "Kept him? Grandpa's dead." Michael laughed again, that terrible sound. "Is he? Would you like to meet him?" From behind Michael, something moved in the darkness. Something tall and thin, with too many joints in its limbs. It stepped into the edge of my light, and I had to bite back a scream. It might have been human once, a long time ago. Now it was something else. Pale skin stretched over a skeletal frame, arms and legs too long and jointed in too many places. Its face was almost featureless, with a tiny mouth and huge black eyes that reflected my light like mirrors. And behind it came more, dozens more, crawling from tunnels, dropping from cracks in the ceiling, all moving with that same horrible fluid grace. Some were more human-like than others. Some had patches of normal skin among the pallor. Some had normal eyes alongside the black ones. "They've been down here so long," Michael said softly, "adapting, changing, learning to live in the spaces between. They just need a little help finishing what they started." The first creature stepped closer, and in the better light, I saw its face clearly for the first time. Despite the deformities, despite the inhuman eyes and the mouthful of needle teeth, I recognized something in those features. "Grandpa," I whispered. The thing tilted its head, studying me. Then it spoke, not with a voice but directly into my mind. "Welcome home, Rebecca." I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. They were all around me now, closing in slowly. "We need you." The thing that had been my grandfather continued in my head. "The colony needs your strength, your fresh blood. We are preparing for the emergence. After a century below, we are ready to reclaim the surface." "I won't help you," I said, swinging the poker to keep them at bay. One of the creatures darted forward, faster than I could track. The poker was knocked from my hand, skittering across the cave floor. Michael grabbed me, his grip painfully strong. His fingers felt wrong against my skin, too many joints, too flexible. "It doesn't hurt, Becca," he whispered in my ear. "The change, it feels like freedom." The creatures closed in. I saw now that some had medical equipment, ancient, rusty surgical tools. Others carried jars filled with cloudy liquid. "You will be our vessel," Grandpa's voice said in my head. "Your bone marrow will feed our young. Your body will host our eggs, and in time you will join us fully." They pushed me down onto a smooth stone slab that served as some kind of operating table. The cold rock pressed against my back as they bound my wrists and ankles with thin, strong cords. One of them came forward with a syringe filled with milky fluid. "This will make it easier," Michael said, stroking my hair with fingers that bent. "In too many places, you won't fight as much." As the needle came closer to my arm, I thrashed wildly, managing to knock it away. The syringe fell and shattered on the stone floor. The creatures hissed in anger. One of them struck Michael across the face, sending him sprawling. "Control your sister," Grandpa's voice commanded him. While they were distracted, I worked at the cords on my right wrist. They were tight, but I'd always had small hands. My heart. Pounding, I managed to pull my hand free. I reached for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a sharp piece of the broken syringe. When Michael leaned over me again, I struck, driving the glass deep into his eye. He screamed, a horrible, inhuman sound that echoed through the caves. The other creatures backed away. Startled by the noise, I took my chance. I untied my other hand, then my feet, and rolled off the stone slab. Michael was writhing on the ground, black fluid leaking from his injured eye. "I'm sorry," I whispered, meaning it despite everything. Then I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away from those things. I sprinted down the nearest tunnel, my phone's flashlight bouncing wildly in the darkness. Behind me I heard them, coming. They moved so fast, squeezing through narrow passages that should have slowed them down. The tunnel forked, and I went left, then right at the next split. I was hopelessly lost in minutes, but I kept moving. Eventually I stumbled into a larger chamber. My light revealed mining equipment, old carts, pickaxes, support beams. I'd found my way to the abandoned coal mine, which meant I might find a way out. I searched frantically for an exit shaft, a ladder, anything. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. There, a beam of natural light from above. An old ventilation shaft with rusty metal rungs leading up toward the surface. I climbed as fast as I could, the metal cutting into my hands. The shaft was narrow, but I forced myself upward, driven by pure terror. I was halfway up when something grabbed my ankle. I looked down to see a pale, elongated hand wrapped around my leg, the fingers impossibly long. More hands reached up from below. I kicked wildly, connecting with something soft. The grip loosened just enough for me to pull free. Climbing faster now, lungs burning, I finally reached the top. The shaft opened into the woods behind the house. Fresh air hit my face as I dragged myself out and collapsed on the ground. I didn't rest long. I ran through the trees toward town, not daring to look back. When I reached the main road, a truck was passing. I flagged it down, probably looking like a madwoman. Dirty, bleeding, wild-eyed. The driver, an older man, took one look at me and opened the passenger door. "You from the Gordon place?" he asked as I climbed in. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. "Figured this would happen eventually," he said, putting the truck in gear. "Where to?" "Anywhere," I croaked. "Just far away from here?" He drove me to the next town over, to a small motel where I paid cash for a room. I showered for an hour, trying to wash away the feeling of those hands on my skin. I tried to tell myself it was over, that I was safe now, but 3 months later, here I am in my small apartment in the city, writing this down. Because it's not over. Last week, I found a crack in my bedroom wall that wasn't there before. I've started hearing scratching sounds at night, and my body is changing. My joints ache and feel loose, like they're becoming more flexible. Yesterday I reached under the couch for a dropped pen, and my arm bent in a way it shouldn't have been able to. Sometimes I wake up with dirt under my fingernails and no memory of where I've been. And the hunger. A strange hunger for something I can't name. Something deep and rich like marrow. They're inside me now, and they're patient. I feel them in my dreams, calling me back to the mountain, to the hollows beneath. Telling me it's time to come home, that I have a purpose to fulfill. Last night I heard scratching at my apartment door. When I checked the peephole, Michael was standing there. His face was different, paler, with those black eyes. But I knew. My brother. "We miss you, Becca," he said, his voice echoing in my head rather than my ears. "The colony is waiting." I didn't open the door, but part of me wanted to. That's why I'm writing this, while I still remember, while I'm still mostly human. As a warning, if you find this and the scratching has started in your walls, it's already too late. They've found you. They're in the hollow. Space is all around us, waiting, watching, and they're hungry, always hungry. My name is Howard Keller. I used to think the forest was a place of peace, but now I know better. These pines hide something ancient and hungry. Something that waits, something that watches. But I should start at the beginning, before everything went wrong. After 20 years of marriage, Sarah finally left me. I can't blame her, not after what happened to Tommy. Our son was only 12 when the hunting accident took him from us. I was the one who put the rifle in his hands. I was the one who looked away at the wrong moment. The guilt ate away at our marriage until there was nothing left. I needed to get away from everything. The empty house, the whispers in town, the pitying looks. When I saw the job posting for a fire watchman in Minnesota's Superior National Forest, it felt like the universe was throwing me a lifeline. 6 months alone in a tower, surrounded by nothing but trees and sky. No people, no memories, no ghosts. Or so I thought. The drive to the ranger station took forever. The roads got narrower and rougher the farther north I went. The trees grew taller, blocking out the sun. By the time I reached the small town of Pine Creek, it was late afternoon, and the shadows were long. "You must be the new watchman," said the man behind the counter at the general store. His name tag read Bill. He looked me up and down with curious eyes. "Taking over for old Jenkins, huh?" "That's right," I said, picking up some extra supplies. Canned food, batteries, a new thermos. "Did you know him well?" Bill's face clouded over. "Well enough. Strange how he left. Didn't even collect his last paycheck or clean out his cabin. Just up and vanished one day." A chill ran down my spine, but I shrugged it off. Maybe he had an emergency. Maybe. Bill didn't sound convinced. "Listen, Mr. Keller, we're in for a bad winter. Worst in decades, according to the old-timers. You might want to reconsider taking this post at least until spring." I forced a laugh. "I've survived Korean winters during the war. I think I can handle whatever Minnesota throws at me." Bill didn't laugh back. "It's not just the cold you need to worry about. Some places they're empty for a reason." Before I could ask what he meant, the door chimed, and a tall Native American man walked in. His black hair was streaked with gray, and deep lines etched his weathered face. "Joseph," Bill nodded. "This here's Howard Keller, the new fire watchman." Joseph Running Bear, that's what his delivery truck outside said, looked at me with dark, knowing eyes. "You're taking over Lookout 7? "That's right," I said, extending my hand. He hesitated before shaking it. "I deliver supplies to the lookout towers," he explained. "Every 2 weeks, weather permitting." "Good to know," I said. "I appreciate it." "I don't drive past sunset," Joseph said firmly. "Be sure to place your orders early in the day." Later, as I loaded my Jeep, Joseph approached me with a small leather pouch on a cord. "What's this?" I asked as he handed it to me. "A medicine bundle," he said simply. "Hang it above your door." "I don't really believe in—" "It doesn't matter what you believe," he cut me off. "Hang it anyway." Then he walked away without another word. I tossed the pouch into my glove compartment and forgot about it. The drive to Lookout 7 took 4 hours of rough dirt roads and paths barely wide enough for my Jeep. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting. The tower rose 100 feet above the forest floor, a stark silhouette against the darkening sky. My home for the next 6 months. The cabin at the base was small but comfortable enough. A bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom with a shower that ran on rainwater collected in a tank. The real workspace was at the top of the tower, a room with windows on all sides, giving a complete view of the surrounding forest. Radio equipment, maps, and various instruments filled the space. Jenkins had indeed left in a hurry. Half-empty coffee cups, a jacket still hanging on a hook, a book face down on the table, forever stuck on page 87. It was like he had vanished in the middle of his day. I cleaned up, making the space my own. That first week, I settled into a routine. Wake up at dawn, check the weather instruments, scan the horizon for smoke, make notes in the log, radio check-in, patrol the immediate area. The work wasn't hard, but it required constant vigilance. One missed signal could mean a forest fire spreading unchecked. I liked the routine. I liked the silence. For the first time since Tommy died, I could breathe without feeling like my chest was being crushed. The weight was still there, but it was bearable. The forest didn't care about my past. It didn't judge. It just was. On my 7th day, I noticed something odd during my patrol. A series of symbols carved into tree trunks, spirals, jagged lines, what looked like antlers. At first, I thought they were trail markers, but then I realized they formed a perfect circle around my tower. Some looked weathered and old, others fresher. I made a note to ask Joseph about them when he made his first delivery. 3 days later, I found the deer, or what was left of it. The carcass lay in a small clearing about a mile from the tower. At first glance, it looked normal, just a dead deer. But when I got closer, I saw that it had been hollowed out completely. The skin was intact, turned inside out like an empty glove, but everything inside, meat, organs, bones, was gone. There wasn't a drop of blood anywhere. I'd been a hunter all my life. I'd seen what bears, wolves, and scavengers can do to a kill. This wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. Nothing in these woods should be able to do that. I radioed it in, but the ranger who responded seemed unconcerned. Probably coyotes, he said. Or maybe kids playing pranks. Kids? 4 hours from the nearest town? Well, they're natural causes. Animals do strange things sometimes. I knew he was wrong, but I let it go. What else could I do? That night, I heard something new on the radio. Between the standard check-ins and weather reports, there were fragments of other conversations too, faint to make out clearly. A voice that sounded like my own, talking about things I hadn't said. I adjusted the frequency, trying to clear the signal, but the voices disappeared as quickly as they had come. Just interference, I told myself. Radio waves bouncing off the atmosphere in strange ways. On December 21st, the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, I woke to find something hanging outside my window. A crude figure made of twigs and animal bones, tied together with what looked like sinew. Its head was a small animal skull, a rabbit maybe, or a squirrel. It twisted slowly in the cold dawn air. I told myself it was just the wind that made. It seemed like it was turning to watch me. That same day, the blizzard hit. The weather reports had predicted snow, but not like this. The wind howled like a living thing, driving snow horizontally through the air. Visibility dropped to 0. The temperature plummeted to 30 below. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. All roads closed, all travel suspended until further notice. I was completely cut off. No one was coming or going until the storm passed. That night I dreamed I was running through the forest, not as myself, but as something else, something faster and stronger. The snow didn't slow me down. The cold didn't touch me. I was hunting, following the scent of fear. My prey was just ahead, stumbling, panicking. I could hear its heart pounding. I could almost taste its warm blood. I woke up covered in sweat despite the freezing temperature. My stomach growled with a hunger unlike anything I'd ever felt before. Outside, the blizzard raged on, trapping me with whatever was beginning to stir in the darkness of the pines. The blizzard lasted 3 days. When it finally stopped, the world outside was buried under 4 feet of snow. The morning light was so bright on the white ground that it hurt my eyes. Everything looked clean and new, like the forest had been erased and drawn again. I bundled up and went outside to check the area around the tower. That's when I saw the footprints. They were human footprints deep in the fresh snow, but something was wrong with them. They started in the middle of a clearing about 50 yards from my tower, as if someone had dropped from the sky. Then they went in a straight line for about 20 feet before stopping just as suddenly. No footprints leading away. It was like whoever made them had simply vanished. I looked up at the trees, thinking maybe someone had climbed up, but the branches were too high and thin to hold a person's weight. Plus, there was no snow knocked off any of them. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast whiteness. "Is anyone there?" No answer. Just the soft sound of snow falling from branches. When I got back to the tower, I noticed the padlock on my food storage shed was open. I was sure I had locked it. Inside, something had gotten into my supplies. Packages were torn open, cans dented like something had tried to bite through them. And everything, the meat, the vegetables, even the powdered milk, smelled rotten. It shouldn't have been possible in this cold. Food should have been frozen solid, preserved. I had to throw most of it out, leaving me with just enough to last until Joseph's next delivery, if he could make it through the snow. That night, I woke up to a voice calling my name. "Dad! Dad, are you there?" Tommy's voice, my son's voice, coming from outside the tower. I sat up, heart pounding. It couldn't be real. Tommy was dead. Had been for 2 years now. "Dad, I'm cold. Please let me in." The voice was so real, so painfully familiar, that for a moment I almost believed it. I went to the window and looked out. The moonlight made the snow glow blue. There was no one there. "Dad, please. I'm scared." The voice was moving now, drifting toward the trees. Without thinking, I threw on my coat and boots and rushed outside, following the sound of my dead son's voice. "Tommy," I called. "Tommy, where are you?" I followed the voice deeper into the forest. The moon cast strange shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The cold bit at my face, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was finding the source of that voice. Then I saw a small figure standing between 2 pines ahead of me. A boy-shaped shadow. "Tommy?" My voice broke. The figure turned and ran deeper into the forest. I chased after it, stumbling through snowdrifts, branches slapping at my face. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed to stretch and bend. Suddenly, I found myself at the mouth of a cave. I didn't know there were any caves in this part of the forest. It wasn't on any of my maps. The entrance was black, a hole in the world. "Tommy?" I called again, softer now. Something told me I shouldn't be here, that I should turn back. But that voice, my son's voice, had come from inside. I took out my flashlight and stepped into the cave. The air inside was surprisingly warm and had a strange smell, like wet fur and something rotting. The beam of my flashlight showed that the cave went back farther than I expected, tunneling into the hillside. On the walls were paintings. Old paintings, like the kind I'd seen in books about prehistoric people. But these were different. They showed stick figures of humans running from something. A tall, skeletal figure with the head of a deer, its antlers reaching up like grasping hands. In some pictures, the deer man was eating the people, its mouth open impossibly wide. Backed away, suddenly wanting very much to be out of this place. As I turned to leave, my flashlight beam caught something on the ground, a scrap of fabric. I picked it up. It was a piece of a uniform shirt with a name tag still attached. Jenkins. I ran all the way back to the tower. The next morning I tried to convince myself it had all been a dream, but the piece of fabric was still in my pocket, and my boots were caked with cave mud. I was also starving. Not just hungry. Starving like I hadn't eaten in days. I made a huge breakfast, the last of my eggs, canned beans, coffee, and wolfed it down. But the hunger didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. My stomach felt like a hole that couldn't be filled. Over the next few days, The hunger grew. I ate everything I could find, even things I normally wouldn't touch. Stale crackers, raw oats, the emergency protein bars that tasted like cardboard. Nothing helped. I tried radioing for an emergency supply drop, but the radio was acting up again. Sometimes I'd get through hearing voices from the ranger station, but then my own voice would break in, saying things I wasn't saying. "This is Howard. Keller at Lookout 7, I'd say into the mic, requesting emergency supplies, over." And then, as if from far away, I'd hear myself say, "They taste so good when they're afraid. Their fear is like salt. It makes the meat better." I tore the radio apart, looking for some kind of recording device, thinking someone was playing a cruel joke. I found nothing. That's when I started looking more carefully around the tower. Jenkins must have left something behind, some clue about what was happening. I searched everywhere, in drawers, under furniture, in every crack and corner. He found it on the third day of searching, a loose floorboard under the bed. Underneath was a small metal box containing a notebook, Jenkins' journal. Most of the entries were normal enough. Weather reports, wildlife sightings, the day-to-day boredom of a fire watchman. But the entries from his last month were different. Nov 2. The dreams are getting worse. I keep hunting in my sleep. The hunger is always there now. Nov 10. Found claw marks on my chest this morning. Did I do that to myself? Nov 15. It knows my thoughts. It knows what I'm writing. It is getting stronger. Nov 18. Joseph says it's a Wendigo, a hunger spirit. Once it gets in you, it never leaves. It just grows until there's nothing left of you. Nov 20. I can feel it pressing against the inside of my skin, like it's wearing me. God help me. The last entry was just 3 words, written in shaky letters. It's too late. Wendigo. The word echoed in my head. I remembered stories I'd heard during the war from a Cree soldier in my unit, a spirit that possessed people in the wilderness, turning them into cannibals. Just old legends, I'd thought then. I didn't think that anymore. That night, the radio turned on by itself. My voice came through the static, but it wasn't me talking. "I'm coming for them," it said. "The 2 lost ones. I can smell them. Their fear is so sweet." I switched the radio off, hands shaking. There was no one out there. There couldn't be. Not in this weather. The next morning, I woke up standing in the snow outside the tower. I was wearing only my pajama bottoms, despite the freezing temperature. I had no memory of going outside. My feet were blue with cold, but I couldn't feel them. I couldn't feel much of anything, except the hunger. That was always there. I was staring at my reflection in the tower window when I heard them, actual human voices calling for help. I turned and saw 2 figures struggling through the snow toward the tower. For a split second, a terrible thought flashed through my mind. Food. I shook it away, horrified at myself, and hurried to help them. They were a young couple, college students on a winter camping trip who had gotten lost in the blizzard. Mike and Jenny, they said their names were. They'd been wandering for days, running out of supplies. I brought them inside, gave them warm clothes and hot food. They were grateful, exhausted. As they ate, I felt the hunger inside me sharpen, watching them. Something dark and terrible was whispering at the back of my mind. I kept seeing flashes in my head, blood on snow, meat between my teeth. I made excuses and went outside, gulping the cold air, trying to clear my head. This wasn't me. These thoughts weren't mine. When I came back in, Mike was looking at Jenkins' journal, which I'd left open on the table. "What's a Wendigo?" he asked. Before I could answer, the lights went out. The backup generator should have kicked in, but it didn't. We were in complete darkness. "Stay here," I told them. "I'll check the generator." I went downstairs to the generator room. There was nothing wrong with it that I could see. It just wouldn't start. As I was checking the fuel line, I heard Jenny scream. I ran back upstairs to find Mike alone, looking terrified. "Something took her," he said. "We heard scratching at the window and she went to look. Then the window just broke open. Something pulled her out. It happened so fast. We grabbed flashlights and followed a trail of blood into the forest. The blood droplets led straight to the cave I'd found earlier. Mike wanted to go in right away, but I convinced him to wait until morning. Whatever had taken Jenny, I didn't want to face it in the dark. We went back to the tower and barricaded the doors and windows. I gave Mike the spare hunting rifle. Neither of us slept. In the morning, the blood trail was gone, covered by fresh snow. But I knew where it had led. We hiked to the cave, both of us jumping at every sound. "I read that journal," Mike said as we walked. "You don't really believe in that Wendigo stuff, do you?" "I don't know what I believe anymore," I admitted. At the cave entrance, Mike pointed his flashlight inside. "Jenny!" he called. "Jenny, are you in there?" No answer. We went in, following the tunnel deeper than I had before. The cave branched in several directions. We chose a path and stayed close. Together, our flashlight beams bouncing off the walls. "What's that smell?" Mike gagged. I'd noticed it too. The same rotting fur smell from before, but stronger now, much stronger. We turned a corner and found ourselves in a large chamber. Our flashlights revealed piles of bones, deer, rabbit, other animals I couldn't identify, and human, definitely human. Among the bones were personal items, a watch, a hiking boot, a backpack, and a torn jacket with a patch that read U.S. Forest Service. "Jenkins," I whispered. "We need to get out of here," Mike said, backing away. "We need to get help." "Wait," I said, pointing my light at something on the ground. "Isn't that Jenny's hat?" Mike moved forward to look. That's when I felt something change inside me. A surge of hunger so powerful it doubled me over. When I straightened up, I wasn't in control anymore. Something else was using my body. "Mike," I heard myself say, though I wasn't the one speaking, "I think I see her. Over here." Mike turned his back to me, looking where I was pointing. I felt my hand reach for the hunting knife. "On my belt." "I don't see anything," Mike said, turning back. He saw the knife in my hand and his eyes widened. "Howard, what are you doing?" I tried to fight it, tried to stop my arm from moving, but it was like I was locked inside my own head, watching someone else control my body. "Run," I managed to say, my real voice breaking through for just a moment. Mike didn't need to be told twice. He bolted, dropping his flashlight in his panic. I, or whatever was controlling me, chased after him. I was faster than I should have been, moving through the dark cave as if I could see perfectly. I caught him at the cave entrance, tackling him to the ground. There was a struggle. The knife flashed. Then blood. So much blood on the white snow. I blacked out. When I came to, I was back in the tower. My clothes were soaked with blood. There was something raw and red in my hands, and a coppery taste in my mouth. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach. But the hunger remained. In the mirror, my reflection looked wrong. My face was gaunt, my eyes sunken. And behind me, just for a moment, I thought I saw something tall and thin, with antlers branching from its skull. The blizzard came back. That night, worse than before. The wind screamed around the tower like a living thing in pain. The temperature dropped so low that the windows frosted over from the inside. I barricaded myself in, fighting the hunger that gnawed at me constantly now. I tried not to sleep, afraid of what I might do, where I might go. But exhaustion won eventually. I dreamed of running through the snow on all fours, faster than any human could move. In the dream, I wasn't cold. I was never cold now. I woke to someone pounding on the door downstairs. "Howard Keller, open up!" It was Joseph Running Bear's voice. Through the window, I could see his truck parked near the tower, chains on the tires. How had he made it through in this weather? I hesitated, afraid of what I might do to him, but I needed help. Oh God, I needed help. I went downstairs and opened the door. Joseph took one look at me, and his face went grim. He pushed past me into the tower, carrying a large canvas bag. "It's too late, isn't it?" he said. "It's already inside you." I nodded. Not trusting myself to speak. I've been tracking this one for decades, Joseph said, setting down his bag. Every few years it takes someone new. Jenkins before you, Harris before him, all the way back to when my grandfather was a boy. What is it, I asked, though I already knew the answer. The Wendigo, Joseph said, opening his bag to reveal bottles, bundles of herbs, and what looked like bones. And now I've got to try to get it out of you before it takes you completely. Outside, the wind howled in what sounded almost like laughter. The hunger inside me twisted and grew as if it knew what was coming and was gathering its strength. The worst part was, a small part of me was starting to like the feeling. Joseph worked quickly, setting up candles and laying out strange-looking items from his bag. I sat in a chair in the middle of the room, my hands shaking, trying to hold on to my sanity. The Wendigo is one of the oldest spirits in these lands, Joseph explained as he worked. It's born from hunger and isolation. It finds people who are already broken inside, like you. I'm not broken, I said weakly. Joseph gave me a sad look. A man doesn't come to a place like this alone in winter unless he's running from something. The Wendigo knew that. It's been watching you since you arrived. He placed a circle of small bones around my chair. What happens if you can't get it out? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Then you'll become like it. The transformation has already started. Haven't you noticed the changes? I had. My fingernails were thicker, almost like claws. My teeth felt sharper, and I was always cold to the touch, even though I didn't feel cold anymore. The Wendigo spirit will consume your soul bit by bit, Joseph continued, until there's nothing left of Howard Keller, just endless, eternal hunger. As if on cue, my stomach twisted painfully. The hunger was getting worse by the hour. How many others have there been? I asked. How many people has it taken? Dozens over the years, maybe hundreds since it first came to these woods. It can't be killed, only contained. Joseph lit a bundle of herbs that filled the room with sweet smoke. And it's cunning. It learns from each person it takes. It uses their memories, their knowledge. The hikers, I said suddenly. It knew they were coming. It said so on the radio. Joseph nodded grimly. It probably called to them somehow. Drew them here. Fresh meat. My stomach growled at the words. I dug my nails into my palms, drawing blood, trying to focus on the pain instead of the hunger. I found something in the cave, I said. Jenkins things. I think I might have eaten him. The words hung in the air, terrible and impossible, but Joseph didn't look surprised. Not you, he said. The thing inside you. And yes, that's what it does. It makes its host hunt and feed. That's how it grows stronger. Joseph completed the circle of bones and stood back. I'm going to try something my grandfather taught me, a binding ritual. It won't kill the Wendigo, but it might. Force it out of you and back into the land. And if it works, what happens to me? Joseph hesitated. I don't know. No one has ever survived being possessed this long. The spirit might have already changed you too much. Outside, the wind suddenly died. The silence was more frightening than the howling had been. It knows what we're doing, Joseph said, looking nervously at the windows. It's gathering its strength. He began to chant in a language I didn't understand, sprinkling powder from one of his bottles in a pattern around me. As he chanted, I felt something stir inside me, not the hunger this time, but something older, angrier. My vision blurred. When it cleared, the room looked different. I could see heat signatures, Joseph's body glowing warm against the cold background of the tower. I could smell his fear, sharp and tangy. I could hear his heart beating. Joseph, I tried to warn him, but my voice came out as a growl. He kept chanting, moving faster now, his eyes wide with fear. He knew what was happening. I felt my body changing, bones cracking and reforming, my jaw stretched painfully, teeth pushing through my gums, my fingers lengthened, nails hardening into claws. "Fight it, Howard!" Joseph shouted between chants. "You have to fight it!" I tried. God help me, I tried. but it was like trying to hold back a flood with my bare hands. The Wendigo rose up inside me, taking control. I saw through its eyes now, everything sharper, clearer, but tinged red with hunger and rage. It made me stand up, snapping the ropes Joseph had tied around me like they were thread. Joseph backed away, still chanting, throwing the last of his powder in a line between us. The Wendigo laughed with my mouth. When it spoke, it used my voice, but the sound was all wrong. Too hollow, too cold. You've been chasing me for so long. Joseph Running Bear, it said. Did you really think some old songs and powder would stop me? I am as old as the winter itself. I can bind you, Joseph said, though his voice shook. Send you back to the earth. You can try, the Wendigo said. Then it made me leap forward, crossing the line of powder. Joseph screamed words in that strange language, holding up something that looked like a carved stone. For a moment I felt the Wendigo hesitate, push back inside me, but then it surged. Forward again, stronger than before. My hand, no, the Wendigo's hand, because I wasn't in control anymore, shot out and grabbed Joseph by the throat. I felt his pulse under my fingers, the warmth of his body. The hunger roared inside me. I've waited for you, the Wendigo said through me. I knew you'd come. You always do, little medicine man. Just like your father did for Jenkins, just like your grandfather did for the one before. Your family has been my shepherds, bringing me fresh vessels when the old ones wear out. Joseph's eyes widened in shock. No, he gasped. My family protects people from you. The Wendigo laughed again. Your family has been serving me all along. You lead the new ones here. Prepare them for me with your warnings and your fear. You make them perfect, broken and alone and ready for me to step inside. I fought harder than ever, trying to make my fingers release Joseph's throat. For just a second I broke through. Run! I gasped in my own voice. Joseph, run! I managed to let go. Joseph stumbled back, gasping for air. He looked at me with a mix of fear and pity. It's too late for you, he said. But I can still bind it here, keep it from reaching the town. He grabbed a pouch from his bag and threw it at my feet. It burst open, filling the air with a choking dust. I fell to my knees, the Wendigo howling inside me. Joseph began the chant again, faster and more urgent. I felt something tear inside me, like my soul was being ripped in two. The Wendigo was fighting, using every bit of its ancient power. Then Joseph made a mistake. He stepped too close, still chanting, holding the stone carving toward me like a cross in an old vampire movie. The Wendigo surged forward, using my body like a puppet. My hand shot out, knocking the carving away. Then my other hand, clawed now, barely human, slashed across Joseph's chest. Blood sprayed across the room. Joseph fell, the chant dying on his lips. His eyes were wide with shock as he looked up at me. I'm sorry, I managed to say with my own voice. I can't stop it. Burn it, Joseph whispered, blood bubbling from his lips. Burn everything, it's the only way. Those were his last words. The Wendigo licked blood from my fingers, the taste sending waves of pleasure through me. I was still there, watching from behind my own eyes, screaming silently. But I was getting weaker. Soon there would be nothing left of Howard Keller. As the Wendigo stood over Joseph's body, planning its next meal, I gathered what little strength I had left. I knew what I had to do. While the Wendigo was distracted with feeding, I pushed forward, seizing control of my body for just a few seconds, long enough to stagger to the stove, turn on all the gas burners without lighting them, long enough to knock over Joseph's bottles of alcohol and herbs, spreading the flammable contents across the floor. The Wendigo realized what I was doing too late. It howled in rage, trying to regain control, but I had one last act of defiance in me. I grabbed Joseph's lighter from his pocket and flicked it on. The room exploded into flames. Fire was the one thing the Wendigo feared. I felt it shrink inside me, trying to retreat. But there was nowhere for it to go. The flames spread quickly, eating up the dry wood of the old tower. The heat was intense, but I barely felt it. My body was changing again, the Wendigo trying desperately to adapt, to save itself. My skin blackened and cracked, not from the fire, but from the transformation that was still happening. As the tower burned around me, I felt a strange sense of peace. Tommy's face appeared in my mind, not as he was when he died, but smiling, whole. Maybe I'd see him soon. The Wendigo screamed inside my head, a sound of ancient rage and fear. The ceiling began to collapse, burning beams falling around me. I didn't try to escape. This was where it ended, for both of us. The last thing I remember was the tower falling in on itself, burying us in fire and ash. I should have died there. I wanted to die there, but the Wendigo wouldn't let me. I woke up in the snow some distance from the burning tower. My body was burned, broken, but somehow still alive. The Wendigo had dragged us out at the last moment, its survival instinct stronger than my will to die. I lay there watching the tower burn, too weak to move. The hunger was still there, but distant now, as if the fire had weakened the Wendigo too. That's where the search and rescue team found me 2 days later. The smoke from the burning tower had been spotted by a passing plane, and they'd come to investigate. They couldn't understand how I'd survived. Third-degree burns over 60% of my body, multiple broken bones, exposure to freezing temperatures for days. I should have been dead many times over. It's a miracle, the doctor told me when I woke up in the hospital a week later. I've never seen anyone survive injuries like yours. It wasn't a miracle. It was the Wendigo keeping its vessel alive, but it was weaker now, pushed deep inside me. I could feel it there, dormant but not gone, waiting. The official story was that there had been an accident, a gas leak. Joseph had come to deliver supplies, and we'd both been caught in the explosion. His body was found in the ruins of the tower, burned beyond recognition. No one looked too closely at the strange wounds on what was left of his chest. The hikers were never found. Just 2 more people who went into the woods and never came out. It happens every year. I recovered faster than anyone expected. The doctors called it remarkable. Within a month I was walking again. Within 2 there was barely a scar on me. The Wendigo was healing its vessel, preparing it. I tried to warn them. I told one nurse the truth, but she just smiled and adjusted my pain medication. After that, I kept quiet. What could I say that wouldn't sound like the ravings of a madman? They released me on a cold day in March. I stood outside the hospital, feeling the hunger starting to build again as the Wendigo stirred inside me. It had been patient. It had waited. And now we were going back into the world, but not back to the forest. No, the Wendigo had other plans now. It had learned from me, from my memories. It knew there were places where people lived packed together, where no one would notice if some went missing. Places where the homeless and the forgotten would make easy prey. As I boarded the bus to Minneapolis, I felt the Wendigo smile with my mouth. It had been trapped in those woods for centuries, taking only the occasional lost hiker or forest ranger. Now it was going to the city, where the hunting would be easy. I tried to fight it still. Some nights I win, and the Wendigo goes hungry. But it's getting stronger again, learning how to live in this new world. And I wonder sometimes, how many others are out there? How many ancient, hungry things wearing human faces walk among us? If you see me on the street, run. Run as fast as you can. Because it's not me looking out through these eyes anymore. It's something old and cold and always, always hungry. The hunger in the pines has followed me home, and it's so very hungry. My name is Garrett Mitchell. I used to be a search and rescue ranger in Wyoming, but not anymore. Now I live alone in these mountains, far away from everyone. And that's exactly how I want it. I built this cabin myself, piece by piece. It's nothing fancy, but it's strong enough to keep out the cold Wyoming winters and whatever else might be wandering around out there. Living off-grid wasn't my first choice, but after what happened during my last rescue mission, I couldn't stand being around people anymore. The dreams are the worst part. I keep seeing myself walking through the forest at night, but it doesn't feel like me doing the walking, and I always wake up in a cold sweat, feeling like someone or something is watching me from inside my own head. My doctor called it PTSD and gave me pills, but they don't help with the lost time. That's what I call those blank spots in my memory, like the incident that got me fired. I was supposed to be watching the North Ridge Trail, but they found me 7 miles away, standing in a stream, just staring at my reflection. I have no memory of how I got there. My boss said I was lucky to just lose my job and not face criminal charges for abandoning my post. So now it's just me, my cabin, and miles of beautiful, empty wilderness. My only links to the outside world are my ham radio and monthly trips to Whitetail, the small town about 2 hours down the mountain. The mountains are different up here. Sounds don't work right. Sometimes I'll hear a twig snap from what seems like a mile away, clear as if it broke right next to my ear. Other times I'll shout and my voice just gets swallowed up, like the air itself ate my words. I was checking my snare lines last week when I met Patricia Blackwater. She appeared so suddenly I nearly fell over backward. "You're the new guy in Old Man Erickson's hunting territory," she said. Not a question. She was maybe 50, with deep lines around her eyes and black hair streaked with gray pulled back in a tight braid. Something about the way she looked at me made me uneasy, like she was trying to spot something hiding behind my eyes. "Garrett Mitchell," I said, holding out my hand. She looked at it for a moment before shaking it. "Patricia Blackwater. I run guide services on the west side of the valley." We talked for a while. She knew these mountains better than anyone, having grown up in the area. When I mentioned where my cabin was, her face changed. "Near the Whispering Peaks? Those rock formations with the curved faces?" She frowned. "Folks don't usually winter there." "Why not? The terrain's not bad. Good water, sauce, plenty of game." She just stared off toward the distant ridgeline. "Winter's different up there. Sound travels strange. People hear things." I laughed it off. After what I'd been through, some weird echoes didn't scare me. She didn't laugh back. Before leaving, she pointed to a distinctive formation in the distance. 3 tall rocks leaning together like they're sharing secrets. The Whispering Peaks. The old people say they sing when the wind is right, but I'd keep my distance if I were you. I'm good at routines. Maybe that's from my ranger training, or maybe it's just how my brain works. Either way, I set up my days with military precision. Check traps at dawn, chop wood before noon, maintain the cabin, forage, hunt, preserve food. Every day has its purpose, and I like it that way. When everything has its place, there's less room for the darkness to creep in. This morning, I hiked to the North Ridge to check on those rock formations Patricia mentioned. I found something strange. A perfect little bowl carved into the stone, smooth as glass. When I whispered into it, my voice came back louder, like the rock was amplifying it. I found more of these scattered around, all pointing in different directions. Some are natural, I guess, but others look man-made. Who would come all the way up here to carve acoustics into a mountainside? On my way back, something caught my eye, off-trail. A flash of bright blue against the browns and greens of the forest floor. I found a campsite, or what was left of one. A tent, a backpack, cooking gear, all arranged like the campers had just stepped away for a moment. But everything was covered in a fine layer of dust and pine needles. The weird part, nothing was damaged. No animal had torn into the food. No scavengers had dragged anything away. It was like the people just vanished, leaving everything behind. Logged the location, planning to report it on my next supply run. But something stopped me from touching anything. The stillness of it all felt wrong somehow. The nightmares are getting worse. Last night, I dreamed I was walking through a tunnel of whispering voices, all talking at once, too quiet to make. Outwords, but too loud to ignore. They all sounded like me, but not quite. Like someone trying to copy my voice, but getting little details wrong. I woke up drenched in sweat, sure that someone was standing in the corner of my room. But when I turned on my lamp, nothing was there. My journal was open on my desk, though I swear I closed it before going to bed. The wind picked up tonight, howling around the cabin like something in pain. Except it doesn't sound like wind. Exactly. There are patterns to it, rises and falls that sound almost like words. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard something that made my blood freeze. My own voice coming from outside, calling my name. Garrett, Garrett Mitchell. I grabbed my rifle and threw open the door, shining my flashlight into the darkness. Nothing there, just trees and shadows and the endless night. But I heard it, clear as day, and it was definitely my voice. I'm writing this with my back against the wall, my rifle across my lap. I keep telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks, bouncing off those strange rock formations. But I know what I heard. I found something today while reinforcing the cabin's north wall. Hidden in a space between the logs was an old leather journal, its pages yellow with age. The dates inside go back to 1932, written by someone named Thomas Fuller, who identified himself as a forest ranger. The first entries are mundane enough. Weather, reports, wildlife sightings, the usual ranger stuff. But around the third month, the tone changes. Fuller starts writing about voices in the forest, voices that mimic people he knows, voices that come from nowhere and everywhere. The final entry chilled me to the bone. The voices aren't echoes. They're learning. Today I heard my mother calling me, but she's been dead for 12 years. Whatever makes these sounds, they don't just copy our voices, they steal our faces too. I saw myself yesterday watching me from the trees. God help me, I'm going to find out what they are. That was the last entry. The rest of the pages are blank. I made my monthly supply run to Whitetail today. Usually, I keep to myself, get what I need, and head back to my cabin. But today, the old man who runs the general store, Morris Harlow, was more talkative than usual. Heard you're staying up near the peaks, he said, while ringing up my supplies. I nodded, not really wanting to get into it. Brave man, he said, shaking his head. Or foolish. Been folks going missing up there since before my grandfather's time. Even the Shoshone wouldn't camp near those rocks. I asked him what he meant. Every few years, someone vanishes. No trace. Sometimes a group, sometimes just one person. Rangers call it exposure or animal attacks, but locals know better. He leaned in close. My uncle disappeared up there in '56. Search party found his camp just like he stepped away for a minute. Coffee still warm on the fire. He wouldn't say more, just gave me a knowing look as I paid for my supplies. But as I was loading up my truck, I could feel eyes on me from all over town, like everyone knew something I didn't. On the drive home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, unable to shake the feeling that something was following me back up the mountain. When I'm sitting here in my cabin with my back to the wall and my eyes on the door, I can almost convince myself that I'm just jumpy, that the isolation is getting to me, that the strange sounds are just the wind, and the missing campers just got lost, and the weird gaps in my memory are just stress. Almost. But at night, when the darkness presses in and the wind whispers with my own voice, I know better. There's something wrong with these mountains, something wrong with the whispering peaks, and I'm afraid I'm starting to understand why I was drawn to this place, like something was calling me home. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I wake up in strange places. Last night I fell asleep, in my bed, and woke up sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the wall. My ham radio was on. That radio has become both my friend and my enemy. For weeks it worked fine, just static and occasional chatter from other people living off the grid like me. But 3 days ago, something changed. I was making dinner when I heard voices coming from it. At first I thought someone had found my frequency, But then I realized I was hearing myself and Patricia having a conversation we haven't had yet. "I think they're getting closer, Patricia," my voice said through the static. "You need to leave that cabin, Garrett, before it's too late." Her voice answered. I dropped my plate. I haven't spoken to Patricia since our meeting in the woods. How could my radio pick up a conversation that hasn't happened? The next morning, I hiked deeper into the forest than I've ever gone before. I don't know what I was looking for, but what I found still gives me chills. Carved into a massive boulder were figures, tall, skinny human shapes with blank spaces, where faces should be. The carvings looked old, maybe hundreds of years. Some were stretched out like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Who made these? And why do they look so wrong? Patricia showed up at my cabin yesterday. She didn't radio ahead or anything, just appeared on my porch around noon looking worried. 3 hikers went missing near your property last week, she said, as soon as I opened the door. Search and rescue found nothing. I invited her in, but she hesitated at the threshold, her eyes scanning the cabin like she was looking for something out of place. My grandfather disappeared in these mountains when my mother was just a girl, she said, finally stepping inside. They never found him, just his boots, placed neatly by a stream. We sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee. Patricia didn't touch hers. "I think you should leave this place," she said, "at least until spring." When I asked why, she stared into her cup. There are things in these mountains, things the elders talked about, things that wear people. I laughed nervously. "Like what? Skinwalkers or something?" She didn't laugh back. "My people called them skin borrowers. They study humans, learn from them. They want to be like us, but they don't understand us." A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the voice on my radio. My voice, having conversations I'd never had. After Patricia left, I found strange footprints in the mud near my cabin. They looked human, but not quite right. The stride was too long, the impression too light. I followed them for nearly a mile before they just stopped, like whatever made them had simply vanished into thin air. The blackouts are getting worse. Yesterday I was chopping wood, and suddenly it was dark. I lost 6 hours. When I came back to myself, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. But the worst part wasn't the lost time. It was coming back to my cabin and finding signs someone had been there. Food missing from my pantry, my journal open to a new entry written in my handwriting, but I have no memory of writing it. The entry just says the same thing over and over. I am learning. I'm becoming. I'm learning. I'm becoming. When Patricia visited again, I showed her the journal. Her face went pale. "My grandfather wrote something similar before he disappeared," she whispered. "You need to leave, Garrett. Now." But I can't leave. Not until I understand what's happening to me. So I set up recording equipment around my cabin, an old tape recorder I found in town, set to record all night. What I heard the next morning made my hands shake so badly I dropped the tape player. It was my voice, talking to itself, having full conversations, laughing, practicing phrases like someone learning a new language. But I was asleep the whole time, or at least I thought I was. The forest is changing. Or maybe I'm going crazy. I've mapped these woods carefully since I moved here, marking trails and landmarks. But now things are in the wrong places. A distinctive tree I used as a marker is now 50 yards from where it should be. The creek bends in a different direction. It's like the landscape itself is shifting when I'm not looking. This morning I found claw marks on trees surrounding my cabin. Not bear or mountain lion. These were too high up, nearly 12 feet off the ground, and they didn't look like animal claws at all. More like long, thin fingers had dug into the bark. I listened to more of my recordings today. At first, it just sounds like me talking in my sleep. But there's something off about my voice. The rhythm is wrong. The pauses are too long, like something is wearing my voice, like an ill-fitting suit. I slowed down the tape, and that's when I heard it. Beneath my voice, another sound, a high, thin whispering that, when slowed down even further, forms English words. My words, from conversations I had days ago. Whatever this is, it's been listening to me, learning from me. A hiker showed up at my door today, lost and scared. Said he'd been wandering for hours after getting separated from his group. I invited him in, made him coffee, and was about to radio for help when he pulled something from his pocket. "Another ranger gave me this," he said, handing me a pocket watch. "Said if I got lost, I should find the cabin and return it." It was my grandfather's watch, the one I keep in my bedside drawer. My hands went cold. What did this ranger look like? The hiker shrugged. Tall guy. Kinda looked like you, actually. Said his name was Garrett. I got him out of there as fast as I could, giving him directions to town and watching until he disappeared down the trail. Then I grabbed my gun and searched every inch of my property. Nothing. No footprints. No signs anyone had been there. But my watch was definitely missing from my drawer. Patricia came back today with an old book full of symbols and hand-drawn pictures. She said it belonged to her grandmother, who learned from her grandmother before her. Sound is the key, she explained, showing me strange circular patterns. The entities use sound to find us, to copy us, but sound can also protect against them. She taught me a series of tones, not quite a song, not quite a chant, that her ancestors used to keep safe. It disrupts their ability to mimic, she said. We practiced until I could repeat the pattern perfectly. The sounds felt strange in my mouth, almost painful, but Patricia insisted I keep going until I got it right. That night, we heard something circling the cabin. Not footsteps exactly, more like the whisper of fabric against the walls, and voices, dozens of them, all whispering just below the threshold of understanding. I started the chant Patricia taught me. The whispering stopped instantly. A heavy silence fell over everything, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Then came a sound I'll never forget, a high, thin screech, like metal scraping against metal. It started far away, but quickly grew closer, surrounding the cabin from all sides. Patricia grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "They don't like that," she whispered. "Keep going," I chanted until my throat was raw. Eventually, the screeching faded, and the normal night sounds returned. Crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional hoot of an owl. Patricia insisted on staying the night. I gave her my bed and took the couch. Neither of us slept much. In the morning, she was gone. Her bag was still there, her boots by the door, but Patricia had vanished. I called her name until my voice gave out. The only answer was my own echo, bouncing off the distant rocks of the whispering peaks. A blizzard hit today, earlier than usual for this time of year. I was securing the woodpile when I saw something moving through the falling snow about 50 yards from the cabin. At first I thought it was Patricia, but as I watched, I realized something was wrong. Whatever it was moved strangely, with jerky, uneven steps. And though it left perfect human footprints in the fresh snow, I couldn't actually see a person, just a kind of shimmer in the air, like heat rising off hot pavement. I backed slowly toward the cabin, my heart pounding. The shape stopped moving. Then, impossibly, I heard Patricia's voice coming from it. "Garrett, is that you? I can't see in this snow." It sounded exactly like her, but the voice was coming from empty air. I ran for the cabin and locked the door, grabbing my rifle. Outside, the voice kept calling, shifting between Patricia's and my own. "Garrett, please help me. Garrett, let me in. Garrett, I'm so cold." I covered my ears and rocked back and forth, reciting the chant Patricia had taught me. Eventually, the voices stopped. When the storm cleared the next day, I found a perfect set of footprints leading from the trees to my front door. They stopped just at the threshold, as if whoever, whatever made them, had simply ceased to exist. I found the cave entrance yesterday, I was digging a new latrine when my shovel hit something hollow. Clearing away the dirt revealed a narrow opening, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Cold air flowed out of it, carrying a strange humming sound I could feel in my teeth more than hear. Something about that sound pulled at me, like a fish hook caught in my mind. Before I knew what I was doing, I had grabbed a flashlight and rope and was lowering myself down. The cave system is massive, much bigger than it should be, given the size of the mountain. The walls are smooth in places, like they've been polished, and they vibrate slightly when I speak, like the whole cave is listening. I followed the main tunnel for what felt like hours. The humming grew louder the deeper I went, until it filled my head completely, making it hard to think. Finally, I reached a large chamber. My flashlight beam couldn't reach the ceiling or the far wall, but what it did show me stopped my breath. Hanging from hooks driven into the stone were possessions, hundreds of them, watches, backpacks, jackets, shoes. Some looked new, others were so old they crumbled at a touch, and in the center of it all I found Patricia's necklace, a distinctive silver pendant she always wore, the one she was wearing. When she disappeared from my cabin, that's when I heard her voice again, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "Garrett? Is that you? Where am I? I can't see anything." It sounded exactly like her, every inflection, every tiny tremor of fear. But now I know better. Whatever is calling me with Patricia's voice isn't her at all. I grabbed her necklace and ran, following my rope back to the surface. I could hear something moving through the tunnels behind me. Not footsteps, more, like the sound of wind through tall grass, but faster, purposeful. I made it out just as the sun was setting and covered the entrance with dirt and rocks. But I know that won't keep them down there for long. Whatever they are, they're coming for me now. I can feel it. And the worst part? I'm starting to think they've been inside me all along. That whatever happened to me years ago, whatever caused, those first blackouts when I was still a ranger, that was them finding me, studying me. I sit here now, writing this by lantern light. Outside, the wind carries voices, Patricia's, mine, and others I don't recognize, all calling my name, all asking to be let in. But I know now what waits in the whispering peaks. I've seen what lives beneath, and God help me, I think I'm becoming one of them. I saw one of them today. I was checking my snares at dawn when the air in front of me rippled, like looking through water. Then it took shape, sort of. Not solid, more like a heat mirage on a hot highway, but standing upright. It was tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet. Too thin to be human, with arms that hung down past where knees should be. And its face, there, wasn't one. Just a smooth, blank surface where features should be. I froze. It froze too. We stood there, maybe 10 feet apart, just watching each other. I could hear a faint buzzing sound coming from it, like electricity running through wires. Then it spoke with my voice. "I am Garrett Mitchell," it said. But the way it said my name was wrong. Choppy, like it was saying 2 separate words instead of a name. "I am Garrett Mitchell." I backed away slowly, my hand reaching for the knife on my belt. The thing mimicked my movement exactly, its body rippling like a reflection in disturbed water. "What are you?" I whispered. It tilted its head. Or what? I think was its head. "What are you?" it repeated in my exact tone. I ran. I don't know if it followed. I didn't look back. I know what they are now. Or at least I think I do. I spent the night reviewing my recordings, reading Patricia's notes, and studying that old ranger's journal. It all fits together. The creatures, I'm calling them skin shifters, aren't fully in our world. They exist, partly in some other place, some other dimension maybe. They can only partially manifest here, and they use sound to do it. That's why the mountains have those weird acoustic properties. The skin shifters have been changing the landscape, creating those perfect sound chambers in the rocks. They're like amplifiers, helping the creatures push through into our world, and they've been studying us, learning how we sound, how we move, how we behave, building perfect copies of human voices to use as disguises. The cave I found? I think it's their main entry point. That strange humming I felt wasn't just sound, it was them, vibrating between their world and ours. But why me? Why was I drawn to this place? I checked my old medical records from when I had my first episode as a ranger. The location where they found me, that stream where I was staring at my reflection, it's less than a mile from my cabin. I was here before, years ago. They've been watching me since then, following me, waiting. I found Patricia today. She was in the caves. I had to go back down. I know it was stupid, but I had to know if she was still alive. I took my rifle, loaded with every round I had, and Patricia's sound chant written on a piece of paper in my pocket. The caves were different this time, wider. The tunnels branched off in directions that weren't there before. I followed the humming. Sound, which grew louder and more complex like dozens of voices singing without words. In a chamber deep underground, I found her. She was standing with her back to me, perfectly still. "Patricia," I called out. She turned slowly. It was her face, her body, her clothes, but her movements were all wrong, too smooth, like she was underwater, and her eyes, they looked right through me. "Garrett Mitchell," she said in her normal voice, then in mine, "Garrett Mitchell." Then in voices I didn't recognize. Garrett Mitchell. I raised my rifle, but couldn't pull the trigger. Whatever was wrong with her, it was still Patricia's body. She took a step toward me, her head tilting at an impossible angle. "We have been waiting for you to come back," she said, her voice shifting between her own and something else, something that made my teeth hurt when I heard it. "What did you do to her?" I demanded. Patricia smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It stretched too wide, held too long. "We improved her. Her voice box now serves us. She is the bridge." I backed away, but other shapes were forming in the darkness around me, transparent, elongated figures that rippled and shifted like heat mirages, all of them moving toward me with the same smooth, gliding motion. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. Patricia's body moved closer. "We want to learn. We want to become. We have been trapped in this valley for centuries. Your people built the stones to contain us. But now the stones are failing. Now we can spread." The humming grew louder. I could feel it in my bones, making me dizzy. The shapes moved closer, surrounding me. "You were our test," Patricia's body continued. "We found you years ago. We studied you. We learned how to reach deeper into your world through you. I remembered the blackouts, the lost time, the feeling of someone else behind my eyes. The others were practice," said a voice from behind me. My voice. "We are getting better at making copies." I spun around and found myself staring at me, or something wearing my face like a mask. It looked almost perfect, except for the eyes, which were too still, never blinking. "You've been going to town," I whispered, understanding finally dawning. "During my blackouts, you've been pretending to be me." My double smiled. "We have replaced others too. The old man at the store, the woman who delivers mail. They are becoming like us. Soon, we will be ready to expand beyond the valley." The humming was making it hard to think now. I fumbled in my pocket for Patricia's paper with the sound chant. As my fingers touched it, the creatures made a noise, a high, thin sound that made my ears pop. "That will not work anymore," Patricia's body said. "We have adapted, we have evolved." The shapes pressed closer. I could feel a strange coldness radiating from them, making my skin prickle. "You are the perfect vessel," my double said. "Your mind already knows us. Your body has carried us before. Now you will help us spread." I felt something ice-cold touch the back of my neck. My vision blurred. I could feel something pressing against my mind, trying to get in. In desperation, I fired my rifle into the ceiling. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Rocks began to fall as the sound echoed, growing strangely louder instead of softer, as if the cave itself was amplifying it. The creatures recoiled from the noise, their forms wavering like smoke in wind. I seized the moment and ran, firing again and again at the tunnel ceiling. The humming turned to that metallic screeching sound as the cave began to collapse. I ran through falling rocks, trying to remember the way out, the sound of pursuit close behind me. I reached the main chamber where all the belongings were kept. The ceiling was coming down in chunks now. The creatures were screeching, their forms going wild, stretching and contracting as the cave collapsed around them. Patricia's body stood. In my path, her face now barely human, stretched into something long and wrong. "You cannot stop the becoming," she said, her voice now a chorus of dozens of others. "We are already among you." I saw a crack forming in the ceiling directly above. With one last apology to the real Patricia wherever she was, I fired at the weakening rock. The ceiling came down between us. The last thing I saw was her body being engulfed in dust and stone. I barely made it out alive. The entire cave system collapsed behind me, sealing the entrance under tons of rock. I sat in the dirt until sunrise, covered in dust, listening. The forest was silent in a way it hadn't been since I arrived. No weird echoes, no voices in the wind, just normal wood sounds. For a moment, I thought it was over. It's been 3 months since the cave collapsed. I should feel safe. I should feel relieved, but I don't. I went back to town last week for supplies. Morris at the store greeted me like an old friend, even though I barely know him. Other people nodded to me on the street, calling me by name. "Good to see you again, Garrett," they said. "Been a while since you came to town." But I haven't been to town in months. Not since before the cave. In the diner, I overheard people talking about the missing hikers, how they'd all been found safe, how they had just gotten lost and wandered in circles for a while. "Ranger Mitchell found them," someone said. "Good thing he was in the area." On my way out of town, I passed a construction crew breaking ground on a new development. "Whispering Peaks Estates," the sign said. "Mountain living at its finest. They're building houses there, bringing more people up." When I got back to my cabin, I found muddy footprints on the porch that matched my boots exactly. Inside, things had been moved slightly. Nothing obvious, just little things. A book not quite where I left it, a chair angled differently. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and for just a second, so quick I almost missed it, my face rippled like a heat mirage. I don't think I stopped them. I think I helped them. The blackouts are starting again. I'll be doing something normal, chopping wood or making dinner, and suddenly it's hours later and I'm somewhere else, with no memory of how I got there. Sometimes I find notes written in my handwriting, lists of people's names, addresses in nearby towns, detailed observations about human behavior that I don't remember writing. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the cabin at night, I catch myself speaking in voices that aren't mine. Practicing conversations, trying out different tones and inflections. I went back to the collapsed cave once. The entrance was open again, but different, wider, more polished. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I could hear the humming from outside, stronger than before. I think about leaving sometimes, getting in my truck and driving as far away as possible. But something always stops me, something in my head that whispers, "Stay, this is where you belong," and I think it's right. I think this is exactly where I need to be. Yesterday I ran into a family hiking near my property, a couple with 2 young kids. They were lost, heading too close to the Whispering Peaks. I helped them find their way back to the main trail. "Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell," the woman said, shaking my hand. "We don't know what we would have done without you." I smiled, shook their hands, gave the kids some candy from my pack. They never noticed that my footsteps made no sound as I walked beside them, or that when I passed through a patch of sunlight, my shadow rippled at the edges. "They're coming to dinner next week," I insisted. "They'll be the first of many visitors. I need to practice more after all. I need to get better at this. The people in town think I'm just that helpful ex-ranger who lives up in the mountains. The friendly guy who finds lost hikers and keeps to himself. No one suspects what's really happening in the Whispering Peaks. How could they? I look human. I sound human. I act human. And soon, so will the others. We're getting better at it every day. My name is Nathan Pierce. I used to be somebody in the world of climate science. Used to be. That was before I published my paper on accelerated polar ice melt that turned out to have some big mistakes in the data. Everyone in the scientific community turned their backs on me. My university asked me to take some time off. Nobody would return my calls. That's how I ended up here, at this tiny research station in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. It sits on the edge of a frozen lake so remote it doesn't even have a proper name on most maps. Just Lake 237 on our research documents. It was the only job offer I could get. 6 months of winter isolation in exchange for a chance to rebuild. My career. It'll be an adventure, I told myself, as the helicopter disappeared into the grey sky, leaving 5 of us alone with nothing but ice and silence for miles around. I remember standing there with my new teammates, watching our last connection to civilization vanish. There was Diane Winters, our meteorologist, with her bright red hair always tucked under a wool cap. Victor Hayes, the engineer who kept everything running and had a joke for every situation. Laura Reed, our biologist who was more comfortable with microscopes than people. And finally, Martin Curtis, our radio operator, who spent most of his time with his headphones on, listening to the static from his beloved equipment. "Well," Victor said, clapping his gloved hands together, "home sweet home for the next 6 months." The station wasn't much, just a cluster of connected buildings sitting on tall stilts driven into the ice. We had generators for power, satellite for occasional messages, and enough canned food to survive a small apocalypse. The main building had our living quarters and labs, while smaller structures housed equipment and supplies. Something felt off right from the beginning. The previous research team had left in a hurry. Their personal items were still in drawers. Half-empty coffee cups sat on desks. But their research data was either corrupted or completely missing from the computers. Probably just equipment failure, Martin suggested when I mentioned it during our first dinner together. These cold temperatures mess with everything. I nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. During my first week, I found strange ice formations around the lake. They didn't look natural. The crystals formed perfect geometric patterns that shouldn't have been possible. When I brought samples back to the lab, Laura examined them under her microscope. "This is weird, Nathan," she said, not looking up from the eyepiece. "There are microorganisms in here that shouldn't be able to survive these temperatures. It's like they've adapted somehow. On our last supply drop, we had a guide from the local Inuit community. He was a quiet older man who kept looking nervously at the ice. When Victor asked him if he wanted to stay for dinner before heading back, the man shook his head quickly. "I must leave before dark," he said in a low voice. As he climbed back onto his snowmobile, he turned to me. "Do not go on the ice at night. Those who walk in white do not like to be seen." "What does that mean?" I asked, but he just started his engine and sped away. We settled into a routine after that. Days filled with research, equipment maintenance, and the small dramas that happen when 5 people are stuck together in a small space. The isolation didn't bother me much. I was used to being alone after everything that happened. And the data we were collecting on temperature patterns was fascinating. The lake showed fluctuations that didn't match any known models. Then the footsteps started. It was about a month in when I first heard them, the sound of someone walking on the frozen lake outside my window at night. Crunch, crunch, crunch in the snow, slow and steady. When I looked out, the moonlight showed nothing but empty whiteness. In the morning, I checked for tracks, but the night's light snowfall had covered everything in a fresh blanket. "Probably just the ice shifting," Diane told me when I mentioned it. "The lake makes all kinds of noises as it freezes and thaws." I wanted to believe her. But then Victor found something disturbing. He'd left some tools outside overnight by accident. When he retrieved them the next morning, they weren't just frozen. Parts of the metal had actually crystallized, forming the same strange patterns I'd seen in the ice samples. "I've never seen metal behave like this," he said, showing me a wrench with geometric frost patterns etched into the steel. "It's like the cold is intelligent somehow." Laura became obsessed with her ice samples. The microorganisms were multiplying, changing form in ways she couldn't explain. She stopped joining us for meals, preferring to eat while hunched over her microscope. At night, the northern lights danced overhead more vividly than any of us had ever seen. Beautiful ribbons of green and blue light. But they didn't move across the sky like normal auroras. Instead, they seemed to spiral and concentrate, directly above our station as if watching us. "It's just a rare magnetic phenomenon," Diane insisted. But her voice trembled slightly as she said it. I started sleeping badly, waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was standing next to my bed. The temperature inside the station would drop suddenly, our breath fogging in rooms that should have been heated. Victor tried to joke about our haunted research station, but no one laughed anymore. Martin spent more and more time in the radio room, fiddling with the dials, trying to cut through the growing static that seemed to block all our communications. None of us wanted to admit it, but we all felt it. Something was wrong with this place. Something was out there on the ice, watching us, waiting. And that was just the beginning. If only we had left then, when we still had the chance. If only we had understood what the gathering cold was trying to tell us. Because the things that walk in white, they were getting closer every day. Things got worse when the real cold came. One morning I woke up to Victor banging on all our doors, his face pale with worry. "The thermometers are broken," he said, his breath making thick clouds in the air. Inside the station, all of them. We gathered around the main weather station where Diane kept her equipment. Every digital display was flashing error messages. The old-fashioned mercury thermometer had dropped below its lowest marking. "This is impossible," Diane whispered, rubbing her hands together. "It's showing temperatures that just can't happen naturally." The heating system was working overtime, but we could still see our breath inside. The windows were covered in frost so thick we had to scrape it away to see outside. When we did, the world was white blindness, a blizzard that seemed to have no beginning and no end. That's when Martin started having trouble with the radio. At first, it was just more static than usual. Then the static started to sound almost like words. "Listen to this," he called to me one evening, holding out his headphones. I put them on and heard what sounded like our own voices. Diane talking about weather patterns, Victor complaining about the generator, Laura discussing her samples. But these were conversations we'd never had. "It's just interference," I said, not believing my own words. "Some weird bounce from another station." Martin shook his head. "There is no other station, Nathan. Not for hundreds of miles." Laura's research was getting stranger too. Her ice samples were changing. The tiny organisms weren't just surviving in the cold. They were thriving because of it. Under her microscope, she showed me how they moved in perfect geometric patterns, just like the ice crystals. "It's like they're building something," she said, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Or being built by something." Then Diane disappeared. She went out to check the weather equipment one afternoon. It should have taken 20 minutes. After 2 hours, Victor and I put on our cold weather gear and went looking for her. The visibility was terrible. The cold bit through our layers like they were nothing. We followed her footprints until they simply stopped, like she'd been plucked from the ground. We were about to head back when Victor spotted a shape in the distance. It was Diane, walking slowly toward the station. She wasn't wearing her hat or gloves. Her coat was open. "Diane," I called, running to her. "What happened? Are you okay?" Her eyes looked glassy, distant. Her skin was blue-white with frostbite, but she wasn't shivering. "I got lost," she said, her voice flat. "I'm fine." Now, Victor and I helped her back to the station. Laura gasped when she saw Diane's hands. The frostbite was severe, but Diane acted like she couldn't feel it. When Laura put her hands in warm water to slowly bring them back to temperature, Diane just stared at them like they belonged to someone else. "I don't remember anything," she said when I questioned her later. "I was checking the equipment and then I was walking back. That's all." But something had changed in Diane. She started spending more time outside, even as the temperature dropped further. She would stand facing the lake, perfectly still, for hours. When she came inside, she brought the cold with her. Rooms would drop in temperature when she entered. Victor noticed something else disturbing. The shoreline of the lake was changing. The ice was slowly moving toward our station, inch by inch every day. "It's not normal ice movement," he insisted when we gathered to discuss it. "It's like it's reaching for us." Martin became obsessed with the radio signals. He started recording them, playing them backwards, slowing them down. One night he burst into the common room, wild-eyed and unshaven. "It's a pattern," he said, spreading papers covered in drawings across the table. "The cold is talking. These aren't random signals, it's a language." We thought he was losing his mind from isolation. Maybe we all were. Then we found the other station. Victor and I were setting up new equipment on the ice when his drill suddenly broke through into empty space. We cleared away more ice and found a metal hatch. It led down into another research station, completely buried under the ice. The air inside was stale, but breathable. Everything was preserved perfectly. Papers on desks, cups in the sink, coats on hooks. It looked like everyone had just stepped out for a moment. The calendar on the wall was from 1958. "Someone should have known about this place," Victor whispered, as we explored the frozen rooms. "Why isn't it on any of our maps?" In one of the bedrooms, I found a journal. The last entry was dated February 12th, 1958. "They're coming through the walls now. The cold has a face. God help us." Then we found the bodies. They were in what looked like a common room, 5 of them. But they weren't normal bodies. They were completely crystallized, like human-shaped ice sculptures. Their faces were frozen, in expressions of terror. One had his arm raised, as if trying to ward something off. "We need to leave," Victor said, backing toward the hatch. "Right now." But when we got back to our station and told the others, Laura just looked excited. "Don't you see? This confirms everything. The organisms, the patterns, there's something here, something that's been here for a long time." That night, I woke up to find Laura standing by my bed, her eyes open but empty. She was wearing her outdoor gear. "Laura?" I whispered, sitting up slowly. "They're calling me," she said in a voice that didn't sound like her own. "They want to show me something beautiful." I had to wrestle her away from the door. She fought like a wild animal, scratching at my face, trying to get outside. When she finally calmed down, she had no memory of what happened. The next morning, Martin wouldn't come out of the radio room. He had barricaded the door from the inside. We could hear him in there, talking to his equipment, broadcasting messages. No one would receive. "There are things on the ice, moving shapes. They look like people, but they're not. They're made of cold." Victor went to check on the generator that evening and didn't come back. I found him in the generator room, sitting against the wall. At first I thought he was resting. Then I saw the frost on his eyelashes. His body was frozen solid, despite the heat from the generator right next to him. When I looked closer, I could see that his blood had crystallized inside his veins, making beautiful frost-like patterns under his skin. I ran back to the common room, where Laura was helping Diane with some weather calculations. I grabbed Laura's arm and pulled her into the hallway. "We need to touch Diane's skin," I whispered. "What? Why?" "Just do it. Touch her hand or her face." Laura looked confused but nodded. She went back into the room and deliberately brushed her. Fingers against Diane's cheek as she leaned over the papers. Laura's face went white. She backed away from Diane and followed me into the hallway again. "She's like ice," Laura whispered. "How is she even alive?" That night, the heating system failed. Completely, ice formed inside the fuel lines in impossible patterns, blocking the flow. No matter what we did, we couldn't get it working again. We huddled in the common room with emergency blankets and portable heaters, all except Diane, who sat in a t-shirt, comfortable in the freezing cold. A banging sound started coming from the radio room. Martin's voice came through the door, high and frightened. "They're here! They've found a way in! The ice is moving!" Then silence. I broke down the door with a fire axe. Martin was slumped over his radio equipment. His eyes and mouth were open, but instead of emptiness, there were delicate ice crystals growing outward, like frozen flowers blooming from inside him. Laura screamed. I turned to see what she was looking at, outside the window, barely visible. In the swirling snow were shapes, human-shaped figures standing perfectly still, watching the station. They were almost transparent, visible only when they moved slightly or when the light hit them at just the right angle. The Frostwalkers had found us, and we had nowhere left to run. Laura and I backed away from the window, huddling near our last working heater. The shapes outside didn't move. They just stood there, watching. "What are they?" Laura whispered, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her blanket. "I don't know," I said. But that wasn't entirely true. I was starting to understand. A soft voice came from behind us. "They're the Frostwalkers." We turned to see Diane standing in the doorway. She looked different now. Her skin was so pale it was almost blue. Little ice crystals sparkled in her hair and eyelashes. She wasn't blinking anymore. "They've been here for thousands of years," she continued in that strange, flat voice. "Sleeping in the deep ice until we woke them up." "We?" Laura asked. "Humans, climate scientists. The drilling, the samples, the probes. We disturbed their sleep." I stepped toward her cautiously. "Diane, what happened to you out there when you disappeared?" She smiled. But it wasn't Diane's smile anymore. It was cold and empty. "They touched me. They're so beautiful, Nathan. They showed me things. How to live in the cold. How to become something better than human." She held out her hand. Frost patterns formed and moved across her skin like living tattoos. "They can control ice and cold at the smallest level," she explained. "They feed on heat. Our bodies are like bright fires to them. Delicious energy." Laura gasped suddenly and pointed to the corner of the room. The air there was shimmering strangely. As we watched, it took shape. A human-like figure, made of translucent ice, nearly invisible until it moved. More shapes appeared around the room. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like people made of crystal and frost, their bodies constantly shifting and reforming. Light passed through them, casting rainbow patterns on the walls. Diane walked over to them, touching one gently. It responded to her touch, reshaping itself slightly. "They're learning about us," she said. "They've been studying humans for a long time. The station we found under the ice, just one of many. Every few decades, they call people here to learn more." "Call them?" I asked, backing away slowly. "The weather patterns, the unusual data, it's all them. They create it to attract scientists. They need to understand us better if they're going to spread." "Spread where?" Laura's voice was barely audible. "Everywhere," Diane said simply. "They want to bring back the Ice Age, make Earth cold again, like it was when they first awoke. They've been trying for a long time, but they need help. They need to understand warm bodies, technology." One of the ice figures moved closer to Laura. She screamed as it reached for her, its arm elongating impossibly. "Don't fight it," Diane said softly. "It doesn't hurt. It's like falling asleep in the snow." I grabbed Laura's arm and pulled her away. "Run! To the storage building!" We bolted for the door. Behind us, I heard Diane say calmly, "They won't let you leave, Nathan." We ran through the freezing hallway toward the exit. The ice figures didn't chase us exactly, they just disappeared and reappeared ahead of us, like they could move through. The walls themselves, we burst outside into the howling blizzard. The cold hit like a physical force, taking my breath away. Even with our gear, we wouldn't last long. "The storage building has the emergency supplies," I shouted over the wind.
And the fuel.
We pushed through the deep snow, the research station just a dim outline behind us. Shapes moved in the blizzard all around, dozens of the Frostwalkers, watching, following. When we reached the storage building, my fingers were too numb to work. The lock. Laura had to do it while I kept watch. The ice figures were getting closer, moving in a circle around us. Inside, we slammed the door shut and piled boxes against it. The small space had no heating, but at least it blocked the wind. Emergency supplies were stacked on metal shelves: food, medical kits, flares, and most importantly, fuel canisters for the snowmobiles. Laura was going through the shelves frantically. "There has to be something here we can use." I found an old laptop in one of the boxes and turned it on, praying it still had battery. It did. I searched through the files and found something shocking: classified government documents. "Laura, look at this," I called. She read over my shoulder, her face growing pale. They knew. The government knew about these things. The documents detailed previous encounters with the ice anomalies dating back to the 1800s. They had been setting up research stations as bait, sending scientists to study the entities without telling them the real purpose of their mission. "We're not researchers," I said bitterly. "We're lab rats." A soft tapping started on the metal walls of the storage building, gentle at first, then more insistent. The temperature dropped rapidly. Laura grabbed my arm. "Nathan, I can see my breath." Frost was forming on the inside of the walls. In the corner of the room, the air began to shimmer. Laura looked at the fuel canisters, then at me. "Fire," she whispered. "They feed on cold. What if—" I understood immediately. The sauna building. It's the only place hot enough. The research station had a small sauna in a separate building. It was the hottest place in the entire compound. "We need to get Diane there," I said, "and as many of those things as possible." Laura's eyes widened. "You want to use her as bait?" "She's not Diane anymore," I said, the words painful to speak. "You felt her skin. She's one of them now." Laura looked down at the fuel canisters. "I'll create a distraction. Get them to follow me to the sauna." "No," I shook my head. "I'll do it." She grabbed my arm. "There's something you should know. While you were checking on Victor, I found records in the lab computer. These things, they show up throughout history, always during climate shifts. They're like Earth's immune system trying to trigger ice ages when the planet gets too warm." "Laura, let me finish," she interrupted. "Heat doesn't kill them. It just changes their state temporarily. They can become vapor, water, ice again. We can't destroy them." The tapping on the walls grew louder. Frost patterns were spreading. Across the floor, Laura picked up one of the fuel canisters. "But we can buy time, enough for you to escape and warn people." Before I could stop her, she had unlocked the door and was outside, carrying 2 fuel canisters. "Laura, wait." But she was already running toward the main building, where Diane and most of the ice figures had gathered. I saw her shouting, getting their attention. Then she turned and ran toward the small sauna building. They followed her, Diane walking calmly through the snow without a coat, surrounded by shimmering, half-visible figures. The cold itself seemed to move with them, the blizzard swirling around their forms. I circled around, keeping my distance, watching as Laura reached the sauna and went inside. Diane and the ice figures followed her in. I waited for what felt like an eternity. Then I saw Laura at the window looking out. Our eyes met across the distance. She smiled sadly and raised her hand in goodbye. Then she broke open the fuel canisters. The explosion lit up the night like a small sun. The blast knocked me backward into the snow. When I got to my feet, the sauna building was engulfed in flames. that burned blue-white in the intense cold. I expected the fire to drive the frostwalkers away. Instead, they seemed drawn to it, emerging from the flames as wavering, ghost-like shapes. The energy from the fire was feeding them, making them stronger, more visible. I ran to the garage where we kept the emergency snowmobile. As I fired it up, I could see dozens of the ice figures gathering around the burning building, becoming more solid as they absorbed the heat. I sped away into the blizzard, the headlight cutting a small path through the swirling white. Behind me, the research station grew smaller and smaller until it was just a distant glow in the darkness. For 2 days, I drove south, stopping only when the snowmobile needed fuel. I was heading for the nearest town, almost 200 miles away. My plan was simple: reach people, tell them what happened, warn everyone. On the second night, I made camp in the shelter of some trees. As I warmed my hands over the small stove, I noticed something strange on my wrist. A small, perfect geometric frost pattern on my skin. I rubbed at it, but it didn't melt. Instead, it seemed to be coming from inside my skin. I rolled up my sleeve and saw more patterns spreading up my arm, beautiful ice crystals forming under my skin. I wasn't cold anymore. In fact, I felt fine, better than fine. The patterns were beautiful, spreading slowly across my body like delicate frozen ferns. That's when I understood Laura's final discovery. The Frostwalkers didn't need to follow me. They were already inside me, changing me cell by cell. I was bringing them south, to cities and towns full of warm bodies. On the third day, I heard the helicopter. They had found me. A search and rescue team, probably sent when we missed our scheduled communications. I watched them circle overhead, then begin to descend. As they landed and the rescue workers ran toward me, I saw the frost patterns on my hands were now visible to everyone. But it was too late for them to turn back. The Frostwalkers had found their way out of the ice, and I was their perfect vehicle. Sometimes at night, I can feel them moving inside me, preparing, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The doctors say I have an unknown condition, but they keep me in a special temperature-controlled room while they run their tests. More researchers come every day, more curious, warm bodies. I try to warn them, but the cold has reached my throat. Now, my words come out as little more than whispers of frost, so I write this story instead, while I still can. While there's still some small part of Nathan Pierce left inside this changing body, if you're reading this, stay away from the cold. Stay away from people like me, because winter is coming. A winter like humanity has never known, and those who walk in white are leading the way. My name is Elizabeth Norwood. 6 months ago, my husband died, and I felt like my world ended with him. We had so many plans together, so many dreams. Now I'm alone with just my memories and my unfinished novel. That's why I bought this house. It's nothing fancy, just an old adobe building with cracked walls and creaky floorboards. But it sits at the base of the most beautiful mesa you've ever seen. The rock formations rise up like giant steps to the sky, with strange old drawings carved into the stone. The realtor called them petroglyphs, made by people who lived here hundreds of years ago. It's a steal, the realtor kept saying, not meeting my eyes. The previous owners left in a hurry, family emergency. He seemed eager to close the deal, which should have been my first warning. But I didn't care. The price was right. And the isolation was exactly what I needed. Just me, my laptop, and miles of red desert in every direction. The perfect place to finish my book and maybe put myself back together. I moved in with just my old cattle dog Scout and enough supplies to last a month. The nearest town is 40 minutes away by car, a dusty little place with one gas station and a trading post run by a man named Ben Wilson. "You're the one who bought the old Chambers place?" Ben asked when I came in for groceries my first week. His smile dropped when I nodded. "That's quite a spot you picked." The view is incredible, I said, noticing how he fidgeted with his wedding ring. Is something wrong with the house? No, he said too quickly. Just make sure you lock up at night. Coyotes get bold around there. Ben helped me load my supplies, then introduced me to an elderly Navajo woman named Grace Begay, who needed work. She can help with the garden, maybe some cleaning, he suggested. Knows the area better than anyone. Grace was tiny, with a face like weathered leather and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through me. She agreed to come by 3 times a week, but when I offered to drive her home on the first day, she shook her head firmly. I won't be there after sunset, she said, already walking toward the road. You shouldn't be outside then either. I laughed it off. The desert gets cold at night. That must be what she meant. The writing was going well, better than well, actually. The words flowed like never before. I'd sit by the window with my coffee, watching the morning light change the colors of the mesa, and the ideas would just come to me. Stories about the land, about loss, about things that lurk at the edges of what we can see. One evening I discovered the root cellar. I was looking for a place to store some extra canned goods when I noticed a trap door beneath an old rug in the pantry. The hinges screamed when I pulled it open, revealing a narrow ladder leading down into darkness. With just my phone flashlight, I climbed down into the cool, earthy space. It seemed normal at first. Shelves with old preserves, gardening tools, hung on the wall. But then my light caught something in the far corner. Animal skins, coyote, rabbit, what might have been deer, laid out in a circle with strange symbols scratched into the dirt floor between them. I backed away, suddenly uneasy. It looked like some kind of ritual setup, probably just the previous owner's weird hobby, I told myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness that came over me. Scout wouldn't go near that part of the house afterward. Whenever I tried to bring him close to the pantry, he'd whine and pull at his leash. And he absolutely refused to walk on the path that led toward the mesa, his fur standing on end and teeth bared at nothing I could see. That's when the dreams started. Dreams of running on all fours through the desert at night, the moon huge above. Me, in these dreams I could smell everything, the juniper, the dust, the small creatures hiding in their burrows. I'd wake up exhausted, my sheets soaked with sweat, feeling like I'd been running for miles. One afternoon while cleaning, I found a journal wedged behind a bookshelf. It belonged to Mrs. Chambers, the previous owner. Most entries were mundane. Complaints about the plumbing, notes about her garden, but the last few pages were different. It's watching us again, she'd written in shaky handwriting. Standing at the edge of the light. David says I'm imagining things, but I saw it move between the rocks. Why won't he listen? Something is out there, watching from the rocks. The final entry was just 3 words. It's coming closer. I put the journal away, telling myself it was nothing, just desert isolation playing tricks on an old woman's mind. Yet that night, I found myself checking the locks twice and pulling the curtains shut tight. A few days later, a pickup truck pulled into my driveway, kicking up dust. A weathered man in a cowboy hat introduced himself as Hank Lawson, owner of the neighboring ranch. "Thought I should warn you," he said, refusing my offer to come inside. "We've had some incidents with the cattle lately. Found 3 of them. And dead this week, torn up in ways that ain't natural." "Coyotes," I suggested. Hank shook his head. "Coyotes kill to eat. This was different. Parts were missing. Specific parts, like something was collecting pieces." He glanced nervously at the mesa looming behind my house. "Just keep your doors locked and that dog of yours close, Mom." After he left, I mentioned the visit to Grace, who was weeding my small garden. Her hands froze in the dirt. "What did the rancher say exactly?" she asked, suddenly intense. I told her about the cattle, and she nodded as if confirming something she already knew. "What?" I asked. "What is it?" "You're not telling me?" Grace sighed, looking older than her years. "This place, it has a name in my language. We call it Skin Taker Mesa." "Skin Taker?" A chill ran through me despite the desert heat. Why? She stood up, brushing dirt from her hands. There are stories, old stories, about things that take, things that want what isn't theirs. She looked me in the eye. You should not go near the mesa, especially at night. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, stay in your house after dark. I wanted to ask more, but she walked away, muttering something in Navajo that sounded like a prayer. That night, I stood on my porch, staring at the rocky formation silhouetted against the stars. Skin Taker Mesa. The name sent a shiver down my spine. Yet somehow I felt drawn to it, as if it were calling to me. Inside, Scout growled at the darkness beyond the windows. And for just a moment, I thought I saw something move among the ancient rocks, something that walked on 2 legs, then 4, then 2 again. But that was impossible, just a trick of the moonlight. Had to be. Something changed in Scout after that. Night. My sweet, gentle dog started growling at empty corners and barking at shadows. He'd stare at blank walls, like he could see something moving there, something invisible to me. One morning, he snapped at me when I tried to pet him, something he'd never done before. It's just the new place, I told myself. He needs time to adjust. But it wasn't just Scout acting strange. I started finding weird tracks around my property, footprints that looked almost human, but not quite right. The toes were too long, the arch too high. They appeared overnight and always led toward the mesa. My writing changed too. I'd sit down to work on a scene about my main character meeting her love interest, and hours later I'd look at what I'd written to find pages of dark, violent images. People being hunted, skin being peeled away from muscle, things watching from the rocks. I didn't remember typing any of it. You're just processing your grief, I said to my reflection. This is normal. But was it? Was any of this normal? The full moon came about 2 weeks after I'd moved in. I couldn't sleep and found myself standing at my bedroom window, looking out at the silver-lit landscape. That's when I saw it. A coyote at the edge of my property, standing perfectly still, watching my house. As I stared, the animal seemed to rise up, its body stretching and changing. One moment, it was on 4 legs, and the next, a naked human. Figure stood in its place. I blinked hard, certain I was dreaming. When I looked again, nothing was there. No coyote, no person, just empty desert. The next day, I asked Grace about what I'd seen. I tried to make it sound casual, like I was just curious about local legends, but her face went pale. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. "The Yi Naldlushi." "The what?" "Skinwalker," she translated. "A witch who can transform by wearing animal skins. They were once human. People who chose to break the most sacred laws of my people. Now they hunt at night, stealing forms, stealing parts of people." I wanted to laugh it off as superstition, but the memory of that transformation was burned into my mind. Why here? Why this place? "This mesa has always been their place," Grace said softly. "My ancestors trapped many of them there long ago, but they are always looking for ways out. Ways to spread beyond their prison. They are drawn to pain, to grief." She looked at me with sad eyes. "Like yours." That night, I took sleeping pills to quiet my racing thoughts. I fell asleep in my bed but woke up on my front porch, dirt under my fingernails and my feet cut from rocks. The sun was just rising, and I had no memory of how I'd gotten outside. It happened again 2 nights later. This time, I woke up in my bathtub, fully clothed and freezing cold. The 3rd time, I found myself standing at the foot of the mesa, the morning sun warming my face. I was wearing my husband's old shirt, something I didn't remember putting on. I started setting up my phone to record myself sleeping. The videos showed me getting up around 3 a.m., moving stiffly, like someone learning how to control my body. My eyes would open, but they didn't look like my eyes. Too wide, too fixed. I'd leave the bedroom and not return until just before dawn. One morning I found blood on my clothes. Not mine, I thought, because I had no cuts or scrapes. I threw the stained shirt in the washer and tried not to think about it. The next day, the news spread through the small community like wildfire. Ben Wilson, the trading post owner, had been found dead. Someone or something had broken in during the night. His body was torn apart and patches of his skin were missing. When the police came to question locals, I hid my shaking hands in my pockets. Could I have done this? Was I losing my mind? I thought about the bloody clothes, the missing time, the strange footprints. Was I sleepwalking, or was something happening to me that I couldn't explain? After the police left, I tore my house apart looking for answers. In a small room off the master bedroom, hidden behind a false wall, I found boxes of research papers. They were filled with anthropological studies on Navajo skinwalker traditions, detailed accounts of sightings, maps of the area with the mesa circled in red ink. And all of it bore my husband's handwriting. Michael had been an anthropology professor specializing in indigenous beliefs, but he never mentioned studying skinwalkers. Why would he hide this from me? And why would he buy a house right next to a place associated with the very creatures he was researching? I called Grace immediately, my voice shaking as I told her what I'd found. "Your husband," she said slowly. "How did he die?" "Car accident," I replied automatically. "He was driving back from a research trip and lost control on a mountain road." You sure?" Grace asked. "Or is that what you were told?" A cold feeling spread through my chest. I remembered the closed casket funeral, the authorities saying the body was too damaged to view. I had never actually seen him dead. When Grace arrived, she brought tea that smelled of herbs and smoke. "Skinwalkers need human skin to take human form," she explained as I sipped the bitter drink. "But not just any skin. They need a connection, someone grieving, someone vulnerable." I thought of my missing time, the bloody clothes. They can possess people? Not exactly. They can influence, push thoughts into your head, and... She paused, reaching out to touch my arm gently. That's when I noticed it, a small patch of skin on my forearm that looked wrong, slightly discolored, with a faint scale-like pattern. I yanked my sleeve down. "They can take pieces," Grace finished, "bit by bit, while you sleep. You wouldn't feel it. They use magic to heal the wound, but they keep the piece of you." That night, Scout disappeared. I called for him until my voice was hoarse, searching with a flashlight until well past midnight. When he finally came back the next morning, something was off. He looked like Scout, but his movements were jerky, unnatural, and parts of his coat pattern had changed. Subtle differences only an owner would notice. I locked him in the laundry room, heartbreaking at his pitiful whines. But it wasn't Scout anymore. I knew that now. In my husband's office, I found a locked drawer. Inside was a journal, Michael's final research diary. The last entries described making contact with something on the mesa, something that promised him knowledge beyond human understanding. "It needs a foothold," he wrote, "a way to anchor itself in our world. I've made the arrangements. Elizabeth will be safe. It promised me that much. She just needs to come here, to live near the mesa. Her grief will open the door, but the process is slow. By the time she realizes, it will be too late. I'm sorry, Lizzie. I'm so sorry." The journal ended there. 2 days later, Michael died in his accident. A sharp knock made me jump. Outside stood the local sheriff's deputy, asking more questions about Ben's death. Blood had been found at the scene, blood that matched my type. I stumbled through explanations, panic rising in my throat. That night, I heard whispers outside my window, a voice that sounded exactly like Michael's, calling my name, telling me he was alive, that it had all been a mistake, begging me to come. Outside, I pressed my hands over my ears and called Grace. She arrived an hour later with her grandson, Joseph, a young man with serious eyes who carried a leather bag full of strange-smelling herbs and powders. "He's a medicine man," Grace explained. "He can perform a protection ceremony." Joseph set up in my living room, creating a circle of cornmeal on the floor. He chanted in Navajo while burning bundles of sage and cedar. The smoke made my eyes water, or maybe those were tears. I felt something inside me twisting, fighting against the ceremony. Without warning, my body moved on its own. I lunged at Joseph, my hands going for his throat. My joints bent in ways they shouldn't be able to, my back arching impossibly. I heard myself screaming in a language I didn't know. The last thing I remember is Joseph's wide, frightened eyes as Grace hit me from behind with something heavy. I woke up tied to a chair. My head throbbed where Grace had hit me. The old woman and her grandson watched me from across the room, fear plain in their eyes. Is she still in there?" Grace asked. Joseph approached cautiously, his hand holding a small leather pouch. "Elizabeth, can you hear me?" "Yes," I said, my voice raspy. "Please untie me. I don't know what happened." "You attacked me," Joseph said simply, "but it wasn't really you." Grace stepped forward. "The Skinwalker has started to take you over. It's been using you while you sleep, becoming stronger each night. I thought of my missing time, the blood on my clothes, Ben's death. Had I really done those things? What's happening to me?" I whispered. Joseph sat across from me. "Skinwalkers can't just take any form they want. They need a connection, usually through fear or grief. The one from the Mesa has been using your husband's memories, his voice, to connect with you. But Michael died in an accident." Grace shook her head sadly. "No, your husband went to the Mesa deliberately. He made a deal with the Skinwalker." "That's not possible. Michael wouldn't." "The Skinwalker has been feeding you false memories," Joseph explained, "making your grief stronger, using it as a doorway. Your husband was obsessed with finding proof of Skinwalkers. In his research, he learned they could grant knowledge, ancient secrets no human should know." My mind raced back through my memories of Michael. Had there been signs I missed? His late-night research trips, his growing obsession with Navajo legends, his insistence on relocating to the Southwest for his new project. "The Skinwalker promised him knowledge in exchange for bringing you here," Grace said gently. "You were always the target." "Why me?" I asked, fighting back tears. "Because you're special," Joseph said. "Some people are more compatible with them. The Skinwalker needs you as a vessel, both physical and psychological, to leave the Mesa." "It's been trapped there for generations," Grace nodded. "My family has been part of keeping them contained. The old ones performed a ritual long ago, binding the Skinwalkers to the Mesa. But the magic weakens with time, and they're always looking for ways to break free." Joseph untied my hands, but kept my feet bound to the chair. He handed me a small mirror. "Look at yourself, really look." What I saw made me drop the mirror with a cry. My face looked mostly normal, but patches of skin near my temple, along my jaw, had a faint, iridescent quality, like fish scales catching the light. And my eyes, one of them wasn't quite the right color anymore. "It's been replacing pieces of you," Joseph said. "Each night it takes more. Eventually there won't be enough of Elizabeth left to fight it." A loud knock at the door made us all jump. Grace peeked through the curtains. "Sheriff's deputy," she whispered. Joseph quickly untied my feet and motioned for me to act normal. When Grace opened the door, Deputy Miller stood there, hand resting casually on his gun. "Evening, Mom," he said, eyes scanning the room. "Got some follow-up questions about the Wilson case." Something about his smile made my skin crawl. It was too wide, his teeth too sharp. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, already stepping through the doorway without waiting for an answer. "We were just finishing dinner," Grace said, moving to block his path. The deputy's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Were you now? Looks more like you were having a little ceremony." His gaze locked on Joseph's medicine bag. What happened next will haunt me forever. The deputy's face changed. The skin around his mouth split open, widening impossibly as he reached up and calmly peeled his own face off like removing a mask. Underneath wasn't bone or muscle, but something dark and glistening, with eyes like polished obsidian. Grace screamed a phrase in Navajo. Joseph grabbed his medicine bag and threw a handful of powder at the thing wearing the deputy's skin. It hissed, skin smoking where the powder touched. "Run!" Joseph yelled, pushing me toward the back door. "I'll hold it." "We can't leave him," I protested, but Grace was already dragging me out. "He knows what to do," she said grimly. Through the window, I saw Joseph standing in the circle he'd drawn earlier, chanting rapidly as the skinwalker circled him. The thing moved like water now, the deputy's uniform hanging off a body that no longer quite matched it. We ran to Grace's truck. As she fumbled with the keys, a bright flash came from inside the house, followed by an inhuman scream. Grace closed her eyes briefly, whispering what sounded like a prayer. "Joseph just completed the containment ritual," she explained as the engine roared to life. "It won't hold for long, but it might give us enough time to get away." "What about Joseph?" I asked, already knowing the answer from her expression. "The ritual requires a sacrifice," she said, voice breaking. "He chose to protect us." As we sped toward the main road, I looked back at my house. Dark shapes were emerging from the direction of the mesa, some on 2 legs, some on 4, some moving in ways nothing should be able to move. "There are more of them," I whispered. Grace nodded. "The one in your house was just the first, the strongest. The others have been trapped longer, are less whole, but they're all coming for you now." "Why me? What do they want?" "The skinwalkers need to complete a ritual using someone like you, someone compatible. If they succeed, they'll be able to maintain human form permanently, to move among people undetected." I thought of my writing, how it had changed since I arrived. "My book, the words I've been writing, that's part of it, isn't it?" "Yes. Words have power. They've been using you to write their ritual, hidden in your stories." A pair of headlights appeared behind us, gaining rapidly. As they drew closer, I could see the driver, a man who looked exactly like Michael. "That's not possible," I gasped. "That's not him." "It's the skinwalker," Grace said, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. "It's taken enough of your memories, enough of your skin, to create a perfect lure." The truck shuddered as something hit us from behind. Grace fought to keep control as we skidded on the dirt road. The Michael thing pulled alongside us, its face a perfect copy of my husband's, except for the eyes, black and empty as the night sky. It smiled at me, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Then it swerved hard, smashing into us and sending our truck spinning off the road. The impact knocked me half-conscious. Through blurry vision, I saw Grace crawling from the overturned truck, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. The Michael thing walked slowly toward us, its movements too smooth, too fluid. "Elizabeth," it called in my husband's voice, "I've missed you so much. Don't you want to be together again?" Part of me did. Part of me wanted to run to him, to believe this nightmare could end with Michael still alive. But I knew better now. "You're not him," I said, pulling myself from the wreckage. "You never were." It smiled, and there was nothing human in that expression. "Part of me is. I have his memories, his thoughts. I know how much he loved you, how much he was willing to sacrifice for knowledge." Grace grabbed my arm. "Your blood," she whispered urgently. "Use your blood to draw a line they can't cross. It will hold them back just for a little while." I didn't understand, but I trusted her. I dragged my arm across a jagged piece of metal sticking out from the truck, wincing as it sliced my skin open. Following Grace's instructions, I drew a circle around us with my dripping blood. The skinwalkers gathered at the edge of our makeshift barrier, the one wearing Michael's face, and others. Some looked almost human. Others were twisted combinations of human and animal features. All of them stared at me with the same hungry black eyes. "It won't hold them for long," Grace said, digging through her pockets. She pulled out a small leather pouch similar to Joseph's. "There's one way to seal them back, the same ritual my ancestors used generations ago, but it requires a sacrifice," I finished, understanding now. "Like Joseph," she nodded sadly. "My family has protected this land for centuries. It's my turn now." "No," I protested. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." She pressed the pouch into my hand. "When I tell you, run, don't look back. Get as far from the mesa as you can." Before I could stop her, Grace stepped outside our blood circle. The skinwalkers immediately surged forward. She began chanting in Navajo, her voice growing stronger with each word. The creatures hesitated, then started to writhe as if in pain. "Run now!" Grace shouted. I ran. Behind me I heard screeching sounds that no human or animal should make. The ground shook beneath my feet. When I finally looked back, a blinding light surrounded Grace and the creatures. Then darkness crashed down and silence fell over the desert. I walked through the night, following the road, until I reached town at dawn. I told the authorities a modified version of what happened, a car accident. Grace staying behind to find help. They searched, but never found her body or any sign of skinwalkers. The official report listed her as missing, presumed dead from exposure. I sold the house immediately, not caring about the financial loss. I moved to Chicago, as far from the mesa as I could get. I tried to convince myself it was over. For a while, I almost believed it, but 3 months later I woke up one night to find myself sitting at my kitchen table, a knife in my hand. I'd been carving strange symbols into the wood, the same symbols I'd seen in the root cellar. And on my arm, where I'd cut myself to make the blood circle, the skin was peeling away, not from the wound, which had healed. It was simply coming off, like a glove that's too loose. Underneath, I caught a glimpse of something iridescent, something that gleamed in the moonlight. I realized then that I hadn't escaped at all. The skinwalker had gotten what it wanted, a way off the mesa, a piece of itself, hidden inside me, slowly growing stronger. Grace's sacrifice had sealed most of them back, but not all, not the part that was already inside me. Every night now, I lose more time. Every morning, I find more of my skin replaced with something else. I've locked away all sharp objects and barricaded my bedroom door, but I know it's only delaying the inevitable. Something is growing inside me, changing me cell by cell. Something ancient and patient that walked the mesa for centuries, waiting for someone like me. And soon, very soon, there won't be enough of Elizabeth left to fight it. When that happens, it will walk free, wearing my skin as its own. And no one will know the difference until it's too late. So if you see me somewhere, in a store, on a street corner, anywhere, look carefully at my eyes. If something doesn't seem quite right, if they look a little too dark, a little too empty, run. Because it won't be me anymore. It will be what walks the mesa, and by then it could be anywhere.